O'Reilly. Are your wiper blades chattering, skipping, or squeaking? Don't let streaks or smearing on your windshield compromise your visibility. When it's time to replace your wiper blades, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and see our selection. Our professional parts people will even install your new wiper blades while you wait. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Oh, hey, everybody, and it's the Hunting Collective. Another week, another show, episode 71 this time, and we're going to start you off with a little behind the scenes, a little life and times of Phil the Engineer. There's been a big movement around the country to keep Phil on the podcast, so I figured if people are going to be hashtagging my boy Phil, we better find out more about what he thinks about things, including peas, Game of Thrones, and other really interesting items. And then we're going to, once again, transport ourselves to Berkeley, California, where we're going to hear from a vegan professor of philosophy, Robert C. Jones, and learn about what he thinks about hunting, about ethical veganism, as he calls it, and some of his greater philosophies. It is a long, deep, and awesome conversation, so stick around for that. But before we get to that, it is summertime, and there's part of this podcast coming up where we talk about a certain sparkly beverage that I've come to be a real big fan of, and the perfect cooler to put that sparkly beverage in is the brand new Day Trip lunch bag by Yeti. Now, you guys all know that I have a long history with Yeti. I love their products. I love their people. I love their company. You might ask, $80 for a lunch bag? I don't know. Not sure. I'm telling you, man, if you get over the sticker on this, I mean, this is one of the least expensive Yeti products out there. It's a great way to have Yeti with you all the time. And as a father who is running to all kinds of swim camps and bike camps and running my kid to the river to go fishing, taking him on road trips to spot elk, and doing just everything with my little guy, this is the perfect thing to have with me. Because he likes water, he likes juice, he likes milk, and so do I. All those things. And so it's a great product for that reason. And it's a product I would recommend. So go to Yeti.com and check it out. So without further ado, episode 71, let's go.
I guess I grew up on an old dirt road, a pedal to the metal, always did what I was told. Until I found out that my brand new clothes came secondhand from the rich kids next door. When I grew up fast, I guess I grew up mean. There's 1,000 things inside my head I wish I ain't seen. And now I just wander through a real bad dream, or feeling like I'm coming apart at the seams. But thank you, Jack Daniels, oh, number 7. Tennessee whiskey got me drinking it.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hunting Collective. I am, of course, Ben O'Brien, and I'm joined by Phil the Engineer.
How you doing, Ben?
It's good. Now, Phil, we got a lot to talk about.
Oh, I'm excited to hear this.
We got a lot to talk about. You have been a recurring guest for how many weeks now? We're like 4 weeks?
I think this is number 4.
And there's a little bit of a movement afoot. Hashtag keep Phil. I saw that pop up a couple of places. A lot of people were giving you props for the way you handled the public versus private land conversation, as well as the way that you handled the animal rights conversation.
Yeah, well, I can tell you my secret. My secret is to let the people who have way more knowledge and experience about these topics to talk for 20, 30 minutes. And then I come in.
Yeah.
I say one vaguely intelligent thing.
Yeah, you just like generalize the situation.
I generalize, and then people applaud, and I say, yes.
That's my whole career,
Good point.
Phil. My whole career is where
great.
I'm just kind of like, yes, a great point, fellow expert. That's how I roll. But anyway, like the movement to keep Phil is strong, and we're gonna. I don't think I ever suggested that we wouldn't keep Phil, or maybe I did. But
I think
either way,
the first episode was a little rocky. I think there was an insinuation that maybe I wouldn't be around.
Now I'm turning the heat up on you, Phil.
Great.
Now there's no one else except for me to do any talking.
No, we don't need Ryan Callahan or Steve Ranella. Who are these people?
Whatever.
No,
we don't need Yanis Batulis in here yucking it up. Just me and Phil. Now, this is going to be a long episode because the interview with Robert C. Jones, vegan philosopher, he's not a vegan professor. He's a professor of philosophy, but also a vegan, and he teaches classes about veganism and ethical veganism. Has written some papers on the subject. He's going to be our guest. I will say before we get into anything else that I really enjoyed this conversation, man. Like as much as I've enjoyed any other conversation I've had with anyone really on this podcast, maybe because I was coming off of a very confusing time that I spent with some animal rights activists from episode 70. So if you haven't listened to that, please go back, listen to episode 70. Hit pause right now. Phil and I will take a break and let you do that. All right, welcome back.
Ooh, that was a long break.
Yeah, welcome back. You've now listened to episode 70 with Matt Johnson from Direct Action Everywhere, and know that I kind of left that one confused a little bit. A little taken aback by some of the points made, some of the assertions around human slavery and animal rights, some of the assertions around disabled humans and animal rights left me a little bit taken aback. And wondering if I was doing the right thing in highlighting those ideas. I will say that I left that podcast thinking exactly that. Is this the right thing to do to let someone like that have my platform to espouse those ideas? But luckily, the next day I met with Robert C. Jones, who you're about to hear soon, and he helped me get through some of the issues I had, and I came to a better place. And I think this 2-hour conversation with Robert Jones was about as productive as they come between a hunter and a vegan. And hopefully you'll think the same thing. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But before we do, got a couple of emails that came in regarding that last podcast. One of them just says it's from Demetrius Mandis Sr. He said, in regards to the point made that we give disabled people rights that they don't understand, and why wouldn't we do the same for animals? I think we could offer a counterpoint that the disabled humans will typically have a caregiver or family member that does understand those rights. There is not another animal that will understand what those rights are and dictate them or champion for that animal. Just my 2 cents. Thanks for all you do. Demetrius from Ohio. Yeah, that's fine. What do you think about that, Phil? You think that solves that problem?
Solve it. I mean, it's a good point that I don't think was raised last week, but yeah, it's just more to chew on. Yeah, I think it's
there's again, I think part of the reason why I was made uncomfortable by that, because there is really no logical way to dance through that idea. I've thought about it a lot since that conversation. I hadn't thought about it at all coming into it. And so now one of the good things about the conversation with Matt Johnson was I was able to think through that assertion. And I see no validity in it. I just don't. So we'll move on from it. Another guy, Dennis White, wrote in, and he said, "Hey Ben, I was really looking forward to this episode, and when you announced that you were going to talk with someone from that world, I just finished it, and I was honestly a little let down. I think his answers were just cookie-cutter responses that he has filed away in his brain just to use them against any argument, anytime, with anyone. If he compared animal rights to slavery one more time, I was going to jump out of my skin. I don't remember a response that he gave that didn't involve slavery in the end. The mental gymnastics that man has to play just to make a point with little or no credence must be extremely exhausting. And on he goes. I can feel that frustration, and I think a lot of folks that wrote in voiced that around that podcast. But at least now we know kind of where someone like Matt Johnson is coming from, and we can work through the things we agree with and the things we don't. So we'll leave that behind, and we'll look forward to Robert C. Jones. But before we do, we're gonna find a little bit about Phil, the mysterious man behind the keyboard. Or it's not. That's not really a keyboard, is it, Phil? What would you call that?
That is a mixing board.
A mixing board.
Yes.
And if there's gonna be a movement around someone, then we gotta know who they are. So Phil, we're gonna go through your entire life story. Your entire life story.
All right. I've been preparing my whole life for this.
Where were you born?
I was born in a city outside of Portland, Oregon. That's
Whoa.
actually in Washington State, called Vancouver.
Whoa. Hotbed for undercover animal rights activists. Is it not?
Yeah, but vegan butcher shops and the like. Yes.
When you mention Portland, that's like the woke capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe we just discovered the real reason you're here.
Yeah. Okay, this is where I grab the microphones on the mixing board and I run out.
He got me.
I scream
5
something.
weeks in.
Scream something about slavery. Yeah.
Slavery, and you run away. All right. Well, explain how your childhood went over there in Oregon or Washington.
Washington. Yeah.
It's all the same to me.
The reason I relate it to Portland is because whenever I say Vancouver, people automatically assume Vancouver, British Columbia, which is the bigger city. But Vancouver, Washington, it's a nice little suburban area. It was a relatively quaint childhood. No, I mean, I went to school there, came to school, college in Bozeman, went to the film school out here. I worked in television after that for almost 6 years, and now I'm here, and I've been lucky enough to be using my film degree in Montana, which is
pretty cool.
Just kind of rare. Most
cool.
of my friends fled New York or LA or the like.
Okay, Phil, now to the important stuff.
Okay.
Ready? You like peas?
Yeah. What kind? Are we talking snap? Are we talking just kind of like
fucking any
mushy?
pea, Phil. Any pea.
Peas are good.
All right, that's a strike against you.
Are you aware did I fail the test?
Are you aware
is that a running thing in this show?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you aware, Phil? If you're going to be a part of this show, you should be aware that I have I don't say I hate peas.
Where did this come from? Who hurt you?
Here, yes.
Peas.
Well, show me on the pod where the pea
Yeah.
hurt you. Listen, there's this thing called shepherd's pie. You ever had that?
I enjoy shepherd's pie.
Now, have you ever had shepherd's pie with a pea in it?
Uh-huh.
It's just like a ruinous little green ball that comes out.
Nope.
No? You
No.
find it to be delightful.
It's very delightful.
I do not. I find shepherd's pie is like my favorite thing, and I never understood why there was like some bites I enjoyed a lot, and then other bites I thought, well, am I eating garbage? Am I eating poison? And then other bites I'd be like, this is the best thing I've ever had. And I realized the bites without the peas were the bites that I enjoyed, and the bites with the peas were the bites I did not enjoy. Now, there's been some people write in, a feller named Simon Lester, that's his Instagram handle at least, is chiding me because he's like in the pea industry. We're friends with pea farmers, that I'm like ruining their legume love, or like they profit from it. And also he says there's good deer hunting on like pea farms around the country. So
okay.
Maybe I've been proven wrong, but it doesn't make me like peas anymore.
Is it a texture, a taste, a combination? All of it. You hate all of it.
All of it. The only
Okay.
thing that I don't hate is the color green. But when applied to peas, I hate the color green.
That's a shame. I feel like the specific shade of green that is a part of the pea is it's bright.
A bright, it's a vibrant green.
It looks nutritious and delicious. And I would say that it's both.
Oh my God. All right. Well, moving on.
Yep.
But we're in a pea cannery right now.
Yeah.
We're in the pea cannery.
There is an entire festival in Bozeman that is named after the pea.
Unbelievable.
So I think you're in the wrong city.
It's misguided. I mean, for sure. We could agree on that, right, Phil?
Nope.
Nope, can't agree on that. Okay. Bald eagle or wild turkey, which one would you choose?
Bald eagle.
Oh,
Well,
this
are we
is
talking
not
about
going good.
eating?
Not eating, no. Just in general, like if I put two things beside you, you would choose the bald eagle. Okay.
Yep.
That's fine.
Uh-huh.
Are you pro or anti apple pie?
Very pro.
Boy.
Wow. I think I'm 0 for 4. What's going on?
But you don't think that like apple pie is overrated?
I mean, what are you just eating like off the shelf grocery store apple pies?
No, I've had a lot of my homemade apple pies, and I
Ugh.
just don't feel.
Man, you get that a la mode, and you get the perfect
I don't mind a la
ratio, and
I don't mind a la mode, Phil.
that is delicious.
But I don't mind a la mode, but I do mind apple pie. Like apple pie is being built up as like this American tradition.
oh well, no, I
fine.
don't buy into that. American as apple pie, nah. But I think it's a very good dessert.
Let me put a few other pies out there for you.
Okay,
Rhubarb pie.
not as good as apple.
Oh my. Oh. All right. Cherry pie.
Not as good as apple.
Oh boy. I'm just thrown off now because this is not going well.
I will tell you, I like like a key lime
Yes.
better than apple.
Good. There, we finally found
Okay,
something.
there we go.
You're a tastemaker, Phil. Let's see what else I got. I'm just coming up with stuff off the fly now. You like cheesecake?
I do. Are your listeners enjoying this conversation?
I don't know.
Okay.
Phil, here's another guy that wrote in. I'll find it on Instagram. But he sent me a message, and it was one of the more interesting messages. The question just basically was, do you consider your listeners when you're making a podcast? And I was like,
I think this conversation answers that question.
I was like, roughly. I mean, yeah, I consider that they're there.
Yeah.
But do I always sometimes I go off into terrible, weird rabbit holes?
Well, I think that's respectable. And I think, your true fan base will appreciate that, you're not catering to them.
No.
They come to you because they
Come to
like
me.
what you do.
Get what I want to talk about.
There we go.
Okay. What do you drive, Phil?
I drive a 2005 Honda Pilot.
Whoa! All right. Shout out to Honda.
Yeah.
Sponsor us. Let's see.
Wait, hold on. Speaking of sponsors,
That's where I was going next.
Is this the transition?
We
here?
lined up. That's why. Speaking of sponsors, we're going to close this part of the show out before we get to Robert C. Jones. And this Robert C. Jones, the reason why I wanted to talk about peas and apple pie and what we're about to talk about is because the Robert C. Jones interview gets deep, as you would imagine me and a philosopher, professional philosopher on veganism might get. It got real conceptual and real deep. So I want to give you guys a little bit of candy before your vegetables here.
Peas, specifically.
Peas. There's this product out there in the lexicon of sparkly drinks called White Claw. Now, it was maybe about 3 weeks ago. I had no idea what White Claw was.
Mm.
I knew that there was a billboard outside of Bozeman that had White Claw, and there was like I think it was like a real nice looking young lady, looking happy. She was looking fit, tan, happy.
Yeah, sounds like an advertisement.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I thought, maybe if I drank that, I could be fit, tan, and happy. And so I was at a buddy's house. His name's Omar, and he started whipping out these White Claws. And there's a myriad of flavors. I don't know how many flavors there are of White Claw. It's endless, it seems.
They're adding new ones every day, or so I hear.
And I think I might have been sitting around a fire when I first put my lips on this, just astonishingly tasty beverage that is known as White Claw.
Well, do you want to explain to the listeners what White Claw is if they haven't had the pleasure?
Again, if they haven't heard about it,
look it up.
Look it up. I don't got time to explain everything to you. But now, White Claw is a drink, is a beverage. Let me just go to its website because I don't know a lot about it. I'm not going to lie. I only know that it's delicious and refreshing on a hot summer's day.
It is what the industry calls a spiked seltzer, I think is the term that's being thrown around.
Hard seltzer.
Seltzer.
Made pure. That's 5% alcohol by volume, which is more than 4% and less than 6%. 100 calories, I think, per thing, and only 2 grams of carbs, which is what I want out of my booze. So that's it. I mean, it tastes like alcohol water.
It's like a LaCroix with a little
booze,
a little friendly handshake.
Yeah, I mean, it's
warm
like,
hug.
How would you? Yeah, no, like how would you describe it?
Well, it's like that LaCroix seltzer water type. It's completely. There's no sugar. Well, besides the alcohol, there's no added sugar or anything like that. It's naturally flavored, essenced.
Yeah.
If you're trying to watch the calories, I think it's a good option on a hot summer's day. I haven't told you this yet. I am actually a very big White Claw fan as well. I am a proponent. I think this is a good product.
Good. It's a great product. It's a great product.
Because there are so many now. So many different brands and companies are making their own version. Actually, like big craft breweries are making their own hard seltzers now because beer isn't selling as well. And so, like a local Big Sky brewery out of Missoula just started making their own version. It's hot. It's popular.
It's hot. Yeah, I was told a couple of times. I was posting a lot on the internet about White Claw, trying to get sponsored. They didn't. I mean, they didn't yet. They haven't yet. Maybe they'll hear this. They haven't yet responded to my many DMs on Instagram.
Okay,
about
are you verified on Instagram? Do you have that little blue check mark?
No,
I think that might help you out.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I think you could get verified.
You think so?
Yeah. Have you? Well, we don't have to. You don't have to talk about it. But I think you should try to get verified. And I think White Claw would be much more inclined.
If I had to check, they'd be like, "Who is this check-marked fellow?" Do you think they would be crestfallen? They'd be like, "Oh no, he's not worth the check," or they probably don't even look.
There's so much competition. I think they'd take the advertising. I think they'd take the sponsor.
You think so?
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, guys. I'm gonna bleach my hair, start wearing some pastel colors.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would go appropriately with my White Claw, my new White Claw love.
Yeah, some like Sperry, like get that yacht look going. I think.
Yeah, the White Claw is kind of like the yacht of.
Well, it has a whole water theme. I think a White Claw, that's like a name of a kind of wave, right?
Yeah.
It's got that white, like
That's
a white cap. White Claw.
White Claw.
Well,
I see.
If you look at their label,
I see. Hey, you've enlightened me. I've no laws when you're drinking claws, man.
There it is. See, look at that. Why aren't they paying you already?
Anyway, we've digressed way far away from the topic. Anyway, if you're listening to this and you happen to be employed at a little company called White Claw, hit me up, thc@themeateater.com. We'd love to discuss a sponsorship package that includes me getting my hands on a bunch of free White Claw.
And I think since I was a guest on this episode where you...
there would be,
where you introduced this idea.
There would clearly be some overflow.
Great.
To your
That's all I wanted
position.
to know.
We could get a little White Claw fridge to go underneath your board over there in the podcast studio.
Yes, or even just on tap, maybe.
Oh,
yeah.
I wonder if they do that.
They should.
We should say, like, we're under extreme conditions here at Meat Eater. The podcast studio is about 5 degrees right now.
I could go on for another 20 minutes about the adventures that I've been going through to make this podcast studio, soundproof, sound friendly, and a lot of that has to do with the HVAC air conditioning system, which right now is pumping out way too much cold air.
Oh, I got an idea. We're crowdsource. Okay, here we go. We got an HVAC. If we have any HVAC professionals and or insulation professionals and or parka companies out there listening, we could use help in all those categories because it is like, I'm of course wearing flip-flops. Are you wearing flip-flops?
I'm not, no.
No, you're wearing sweet. What kind of shoes are you wearing? That could also be part of the...
They're just like a trail running shoe.
Who makes them? You don't even know.
I don't even know.
Let me see.
Let's see, this is the problem here.
They look well worn, Phil.
I've used them a lot.
You don't even
definitely exercising.
New Balance
a lot. You can
anyway. We'll just say they're New Balance. Shout out to New Balance.
They are not New
Sponsor
Balance.
us. If we get sponsored by New Balance and White Claw, dude, we would be the new this podcast.
Steve Jobs.
Oh, buddy.
I feel like he's kind of the perpetual New Balance sponsor, even in the afterlife.
All right, here we go. Anything else I missed?
No. just for future reference, I know you talk about Game of Thrones on this show, even though the show is over. I heard a story about you trying to explain it to Steve and him being almost offended. He just didn't even
doesn't
want
like serial dramas. Didn't understand the dragons.
No, but if you ever want to go into a Thrones deep dive on this show,
I've been asked several times. I've been asked several times since that episode because people don't always listen every week, so they'll like catching up. They'll be like 5 weeks behind. They'll be like, "Dude, did you comment on the ending of Game of Thrones?" I say no because it was terrible. I mean, maybe the worst. Like the last 2 seasons were just not. They were terrible television. I mean, just the writing just went off the rails. The acting went off the rails, probably because the actors were reading the scripts. Like, what do I have to say now? Like the last episode was just I thought I read a spoiler of that last episode, and I thought it was a joke. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, that's not. They're not going to do that. Bran as the king? What are you talking about?
Well, didn't you hear Tyrion? He has a good story. The best.
That's like some ridiculous Hollywood writer that had to save the crappy storyline.
Well, so here's the thing.
He doesn't even have a good story. He was one whole season of the show. He wasn't even in. What?
He was underground.
What was he doing? Wheeling towards the wall?
Learning about, he's becoming I don't know if you heard, he's the three-eyed raven now.
Well, so the three-eyed raven's like, you'll never walk again, but you will fly. I'm thinking this dude's going to be warg into a dragon. No, didn't warg into a dragon. Warged into a raven.
And just watched the Battle of Winterfell.
Yeah, just watched it. Here's sat there in a chair.
The last season had many problems. I did not despise it. I think it had good moments.
Of course it did.
That were overall.
Of course it did.
Plagued.
Yeah, that's like saying
a condensed last 2 seasons. I think if they would have honestly stretched it out.
Phil, that's like saying, well, my car drives most of the time, but it broke down 6 times last week. There's so many big, huge, fat problems.
Hey, I'm not going to argue. But this could go on a while.
Yeah, it could. We may come back to this. We got to get to we got to go to Berkeley. We got to get to Robert C. Jones. Again, this is a big time commitment, folks. You're going to be with us for another 2 hours. So I'm not apologizing for that, but just get prepared. Maybe take a break after this segment is over.
Crack a White Claw. Get cozy by the fire.
If there's a beach around, go to the beach. Sit, get one of those chaise lounges, get in there, and get ready. Because this is going to get, if you thought last week was deep and interesting conversation about kind of the ideological differences between animal rights / vegan folks and us hunters, this one is much, much deeper. And again, I'll say before we get to it that Robert Jones, I hope we can do more with him. I would take this conversation that we had on the road and let anyone hear it live, record it, doesn't matter. I think it's an important one. I think he is a pretty open-minded guy, and he called me brilliant one time in the podcast. That's probably why I like him so much. And so I really hope you enjoy it. I really enjoyed it. I hope to have Robert back, but until then, enjoy this 2 hours Vegan v. Hunter in Berkeley, California.
I guess I grew up on an older road. A pedal to the metal, always did what I told.
Robert, how's it going?
Hey, Vince, good to see you. Good to be here.
Yeah,
good to finally meet you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you too. I have been reading a lot about you and watching some of your videos and going deep into the category of veganism. And we were just talking before we hit record. I'm fresh off the heels of an interview with Matt Johnson from Direct Action Everywhere.
Right.
Learning about speciesism and learning about animal personhood, things of that nature. So my mind is, you'll have to forgive me, my mind is spinning right now.
Right.
But I do, as we were saying before, I do very much want to learn about these things. I have an open curiosity. There's absolutely nothing about me being a hunter and a meat eater that makes me want to know less about this or fight against it.
Right.
I have a legitimate open curiosity about what you do and what Matt does. So before we get going, give us a quick rundown of your background in both philosophy and then also veganism, as it were.
Well, I can tell you, and the short version of the story is that I grew up in a basic American household, meat 3 times a day, and my mother, she would always tease me because after I became vegan, she would say to me, I remember when you were a teenager and I didn't serve meat at a meal, and I would say to her, Mom, this isn't a real meal. You're supposed to have meat at a meal. So now, of course, now she looks at me. But yeah, so I grew up in that, basic American lifestyle, growing up on the East Coast in Philly, and then I moved to LA, and I had a friend who worked at a natural food store. And the first thing that happened was he showed me a little brochure of a veal crate. And I ate a lot of veal because that was somewhat part of my food.
Yeah, veal
diet.
cutlets.
Veal
is
cutlets.
This is the way.
Veal scallopini. My mother was Italian. So I was like, oh, I had no idea they put these little things in little crates. And so that sort of planted a seed in my head. I was like, oh man, I kind of feel bad. Like, I don't know if I could eat veal anymore. So that was the first exposure. And then I read a book called Diet for a New America, written by John Robbins. I don't know if you know John Robbins.
I don't know.
John Robbins, he was the heir to the Baskin Robbins ice cream throne.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his father and his uncle started Baskin Robbins. And at some point in his development, he decided to be a vegan and animal rights person. And he actually renounced, he turned down the family business and moved to Hawaii and grew plants. But anyway, he wrote a book called Diet for a New America. And really, I had one of those like road to Damascus moments. Like the scales fell from my eyes. I read this book in like 2 days. It just laid out like, here's the animal rights argument. Here's the environmental argument. Here's the health argument. And I was it. I was just like, this makes perfect sense. I don't want to cause unnecessary suffering. I want to decrease it. And I just, on the spot, kind of became a vegan.
Yeah. And how old were you then?
I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
Early 20s.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about again before we hit record that there is this idea that I want to fight against, that all, like you kind of you assign that fringe motive to all the thing you don't agree with, right?
Right.
And I think it's good to hear your story and other stories about how you came to this. To one, you know what it's like to eat meat. You understand what it tastes like. You didn't grow up in a liberal incubator in L.A. and
No.
Jane Fonda was not your mother.
No.
So like
She did sit in our tank a few times outside the house.
well. Well, that just reaffirms that all vegans know Jane Fonda. But yeah, I mean, for us, one to set that up, who you are and how you came to what you believe. Because I feel very strongly that I came to my passion a certain way.
Yeah.
And you came in your own. You got to your passion in your own way, and your studies in your own way. So I mean, it's critical to that understanding. Your story is critical, I think, for hunters to understand.
Well, I have hunted too.
Yeah.
As a teenager. I hunted just locally in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, obviously. Hold on a second. Sorry.
Yep, go for it.
You can edit.
Oh, yeah.
Let me take a drink of water.
We'll leave it in. Be like, the vegan guy can't.
He's unhealthy.
His throat is dry because he doesn't have B12.
So, as you know, Pennsylvania is a hunting state.
Sure.
And I grew up, people would go up to like Scranton and they would go hunting, and deer hunting is a big deal. And so I've actually killed animals with a gun.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do feel bad about it now when I think about it. Those little innocent, they were like sitting ducks. They had no idea that I was ready to kill them. And so, but I was doing it as a teenager where I was like, it was fun. Like I got a certain kind of gratification from it. So I do have that in my background. As far as what happened with me, like how did I end up, say, being a professor who's writing, professional philosophy on animal rights? After I did that whole, kind of vegan thing, I read that book. Then I started to. Then I discovered that there were philosophical arguments that would undergird these beliefs. So rather than saying something like, animals are like you and they have rights and stuff, when I started to dig deep into it and I started to read sort of the classics, which would be Peter Singer, Animal Liberation, and Tom Reagan, The Case for Animal Rights, then I started to get into like the nitty gritty because I've always kind of been analytical. And so then I went to graduate school and I just went to get a master's, but my professors, they they encouraged me to do the PhD thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm a blue collar guy. I applied to a bunch of schools, and I got a phone call one day from Stanford saying, you're in, the PhD program. And I was like, wait, I know there's a lot of Robert Joneses, and maybe there's another Robert Jones.
There's
no
a Bob.
way.
Yeah, Bob Jones over
There's
there.
no way I did it. So that was like, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So when I went there, I animal rights in the world of philosophy, it's itself fringe. There's not a lot of philosophers who do this work. I mean, there's more now, but this was in 1990. This is almost like I got accepted to. It's like 19 years ago. So what I'm getting at is that at the time I thought I'm just going to write my dissertation. My dissertation is called "The Moral Significance of Animal Cognition." So I really got into like the relationship between cognitive properties of non-humans and how we value them. That was something I got really obsessed with. Mm-hmm. But what I decided was, I thought, there's no one who ever went to Stanford in the philosophy department who did animal rights. So I'm going to be that person, and I'm going to use the cachet of West Coast Ivy to kind of legitimate in a certain way aspects of animal rights.
Sure.
So I've been doing that now for, I got this job in 2008. So it's been 11 years since I've been, quote, professional philosopher. And yeah, I think there's a lot there. I think the issue of the moral status of non-human animals, it's a really complicated issue. It's super complicated.
And I think, I'm drawn to those complicated issues. I think that's where the meat of our humanity and like the things that are really tugging at us, even as
Ben, did you have to say meat there?
Yeah,
the tofu.
I'm just trying to make you squirm. Tofu kills stuff too. We'll get there. I just think these issues are, I'll keep saying it, meaty. And that's where we can really get to the things that tug at us philosophically. I feel, at least. There's a lot of things that tug at me philosophically about hunting, and I'm just unabashed at trying to explore them.
Right.
Just happen to do it in the public forum. But I mean, there's really, if I were to sit down and be like, what worries me about hunting personally, intrinsically, what is it that just makes me ache? And it's just like, boy, man, this thing it's the industry I'm in, it's the lifestyle I've chosen, it's the thing I'm most passionate about, it's the thing I think the most about.
Right.
And it involves killing things.
Yes.
And ripping their guts out.
Right.
And so is that, historically, if I look at the span of history in 30 years, are people going to look back at me and be like, what is this guy doing?
Right.
So that tugs at me, and I'm not, I'm open about it. I'm not ashamed of that.
Yeah.
It's like, probably should, because if I'm going to do something as serious as go out into the woods and find an animal, to pick the animal I'd like to kill, go and kill it, and then dismember it and bring it home and feed it to my family, that's a pretty complex and serious thing to go and do. It's not a bike ride.
Right.
It's a pretty 3-dimensional kind of like way to like recreate or to find joy in the world. So it's something that tugs at me, and I think that's probably like we probably have those same kind of quandaries within our consumption, within what we're really involved in. It's just like you look at the world and you're like, I got some problems with this.
Yeah.
How can I solve those problems?
Right.
And I think that's where most vegans, I don't know about you, most vegans and me kind of align. Like we see the issues with consumption and the human engine that we are, and we're trying to solve those things.
Yeah.
Do you think? So I want to talk about we'll probably talk about this forever, but I read Veganism as an Aspiration, and I was like clapping during most of it because I think what I'd like to do is first set up what most hunters or most folks might think about vegans, and in veganism as an aspiration, you knock a lot of those right over.
Okay.
Like at least in my opinion, you do. So give us your the two forms of veganism that you conceive there to be, or the two different ways that people can conceive of veganism.
Yeah. So in that paper, and I want to say I co-authored that with Lori Gruen.
Yes.
She's one of the giants in the world of animal rights, and I owe her a lot for that. But actually, I've since developed that idea a little bit more.
I was going to say it's been a while. I should say that it's been 2015, so I'm sure there's lots since.
Yeah,
then.
I've developed some stuff, but basically the way that I conceived of veganism, the way that Lori and I conceived of it, and then I've been thinking more about it is, so let me just say first of all that it's so, I feel like I've kind of gone around the circle on this. I've gone around the wheel. And what I mean by that is when people say, like, do I identify as a vegan? Because of the way that the term and the concept vegan has sort of traveled through the culture, it's almost like I distance myself these days because veganism, in many ways, and I talk about it in the paper you're talking about, veganism is in some ways, well, first of all, veganism, at least today in 2019, in popular culture, it's about food choices, right? It's about the choices you make when you go to purchase food or make food. And in many ways, it's divorced from the issue of justice. And I see, quote, animal rights or animal ethics issues as a social justice issue about non-human animals. And so I'm reluctant to use veganism interchangeably with animal justice or animal ethics because, you know, Beyonce's a vegan and all these people are vegan and they eat plant-based foods. And so what I argue in that paper is, you know, you can think of yourself what I call like identity vegan or lifestyle vegan. So there are vegans. I mean, I don't know that this is not scientific by any means, but there is a stigma attached to vegans where people think that vegans are kind of zealous, self-righteous kinds of people. And they think I'm holier than thou. And I have clean hands because I don't consume any animal products. I don't wear leather. I don't eat honey. I don't use wool. I don't, right? And I know all this stuff because I lived it, right?
Yeah.
So
it says in the paper, it says these vegans have an air of moral certitude and moral superiority.
Yeah. So there's a certain, whether it be factual or not, at least there's a certain caricature of vegans that they have a kind of moral superiority.
Yeah. And I was at the Butcher's Son. Shout out to the Butcher's Son.
Oh, yeah. How'd you like it there?
It was good.
What did you? Well, I'm curious. I'm so curious. What did you order?
I had. Hopefully, you can give me some more dope on what's really going on there. I had the chicken grinder, which is a nice sandwich with some kind of chicken facsimile there, like whatever that was. I didn't have time. I was like, I got to eat lunch, then we got to go record a podcast. I don't have really time to take this menu and kind of like, but I took a picture of the menu so I could go back and look at the ingredients and kind of break down what was what. But it was good.
Yeah.
I would eat there every day. I had any problem with that. I just, why did they, we'll go down this rabbit hole because we should. Why did they say chicken though? Like the only thing I don't understand is why would you say that it's chicken when it's not?
Yeah.
I don't understand. And they also said, like, much like you're saying, we don't like the term vegan.
Yeah.
When I was talking to the cashier, he's like, yeah, we don't really, we say vegan, it's in there, but we don't really like to say it anymore. It's plant-based.
Yeah.
You know, that's what he was saying. And much the same way you're saying it.
And I think plant-based, and I want to go back to that issue about why they say chicken and the Butcher's Son. I mean, I don't know if people who are listening to the podcast, Butcher's Son is a fully vegan deli in Berkeley. And I don't know if it was when you were there. Every time I've been there, it's pretty packed.
You couldn't get a table. Yeah. And in fact, the folks I was with from Direct Action Everywhere, they were like, this is the slowest we've seen it. It's good, but it's all I care about is good food. I don't really care.
Yeah, no, it's good food.
It's great food to me. I just was like a bit like, why? You just tell me what's in it. I want to know what I'm eating.
Yeah.
It's not chicken. I know that.
Right.
So I just like to know if it's a wheat-based, shred or whatever it is. I just like to know that. I don't. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You're not tricking me.
Yeah.
But what you are doing is confusing me.
I think this is a good point. I'm glad you brought up the plant-based thing because this touches on exactly what I was talking about, in that, you know, within the vegan movement, there is like the plant-based. Now, when you say plant-based, usually, not always, but usually what that implies is that I'm a vegan for these reasons. It's not so much focused, say, on animal justice issues as much, and it can be. They overlap. There's a lot of overlap, but it's more about perhaps maybe health reasons, or it could be something like environmental reasons, environmental degradation, and is associated with, or I should say, factory, industrial produced agriculture, and environmental degradation. So plant-based, for me, if you looked at my diet, if you just said, Robert, write down everything you eat for a week, it would look like a plant-based person. But I personally feel like my cause is a political cause. It's a social justice cause. It's not about diet, right?
Yeah.
So going back to our original question. So, and I really, what I definitely don't want to do is come on this podcast and pile on vegans, and because they're already demonized enough.
Yeah.
But what I want to say is the version of veganism that I advocate for, and I'm writing on it now. I've been struggling with writing this book for a year, which is thinking about the social justice aspects of this issue. But veganism as a liberation movement, not so much as a food movement, right? So veganism as a political stance, rejecting things like corporate consumer capitalism and environmental degradation. All these things are all tied together, human health issues. So the picture is very big. If you're a vegan, and I mention this all the time when I give these talks, like, let's say you're a vegan, and by vegan, what you mean is that you do not consume, and I mean that literally and figuratively with regard to, say, purchasing, you don't consume animal products. So you might think, I've removed myself from the cycle of suffering, right? Because I'm not causing any suffering. However, let's say you, for example, you go to Walmart and you buy a cotton t-shirt because it's cheap, and that cotton, to produce the cotton, is really environmentally, it takes a lot of resources to produce cotton. And then there might be a young girl who's in Indonesia making, crap wages, to produce that clothing under this kind of, global corporate capitalist economy. And so if you think that withholding you're voting with your dollars, if you're voting, you're saying, I'm going to avoid suffering, because most vegans who are ethical vegans, and I mean non-like health plant-based versions, of veganism, but most people who say, if I say to you, why are you a vegan? And you say, because I don't want to cause unnecessary suffering. So there's an implication that by refraining from eating animal products, I'm decreasing the suffering in the world.
Yeah.
But all of our purchases, this is what I say in that, I think that's the paper where I say, we all have blood on our hands.
Oh, yeah.
We all have blood on our hands.
Yeah, some great quotes in here and some things like that. That's where I'm reading them. Like, look, I think conceptually veganism is great. Like I think it's a choice. It's the thing I want to do conceptually. It's great because it's you are metering or limiting in some way your impact on the world, and you're doing it for altruistic reasons.
Right.
But the big argument that most even forward-facing folks that I know, you're like, listen, you can't. Your hands aren't clean.
Yeah.
They just aren't. And
right.
You look at, like, say, quinoa, right? Quinoa is mostly produced in the Andes. I mean, there's when there's a higher demand for quinoa, the price goes up for the people that are using it and eating it where they are. You know, Mexican avocados is another great example of the more demand for Mexican avocados raises the prices and screws with a lot of things, right? And deforestation comes from people like, I got to produce more avocados. Let's just get rid of this forest.
Sure.
And so there's just this acknowledgement of that is a good, like when I was reading through that, I'm like, this acknowledgement helps to mitigate almost everything we disagree on, or at least the core basic issues I think most hunters or most meat eaters have with vegans. It's like the moral superiority thing is just, that's where I get off the bus, That's where I think that's where most folks get off the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could start the conversation by saying, yeah, we get it. Like we got a lot of things to figure out here, but this is just my way of trying to better the world by consuming in a better way.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Right.
I think that's understandable because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Again, I think that, and I don't know, I don't know the hunting culture, Ben, as well as you do, obviously, but I would say, if I had to guess, both in the animal rights world and in the hunting world, the kind of thing that you and I are talking about is not the predominant view. At least from my experience, it's not like, I'd say in the population in general, most people, most consumers don't think about the interconnectedness of all these kinds of industries and human endeavors as the impacts that they have, right? So I think it's important for, no matter where you come down on this issue of hunting or animal rights, we're all involved in this cycle of destruction. You can't get out of the cycle of destruction. You can't have 7.5 billion people, 9 billion people by 2050, 11 billion people by the end of the century. You can't have that many people and have the place be sustainable. I mean, you may have heard the statistic. If everyone on the planet lived an affluent Western lifestyle, we would need 5 planet Earths as like resources, right?
Yeah.
So we're all in this together. So the fact that I might refrain from purchasing or be an activist in trying to, prevent animal suffering, that doesn't remove me from animal suffering. It doesn't remove me from suffering or human suffering or degradation of the planet. However, I do want to say, here's what I think is important, and this is my friend John Sabanmatsu, who is a great animal philosopher in Boston, animal rights guy. He has a whole paper that I highly recommend. It's called The Animal of Bad Faith, and he talks about how many of our moral decisions reflect a certain kind of what Jean-Paul Sartre, the philosopher, called bad faith, and that is, we want to tell ourselves a story in a way that it's like, think about it like this. We're deceiving ourselves. So when you think about normal bad faith, you think bad faith, if I make a bad faith contract with you, I know in advance, premeditatively say, yeah, if you build this thing, I'll pay you, but I know I'm not going to pay you. That's not the kind of bad faith. This kind of bad faith is a bad faith when I'm acting contrary to what my morals are, but I deceive myself. I tell myself a story. So in the case of the vegan, I might say, oh no, I've removed myself from the cycle of suffering. And so it's okay that I buy this iPhone that has slave minerals in it, or I buy this BMW that has just plastic. There's no leather. Or you might be a meat eater that says like, oh, well, animals are, they're here to be eaten. And I think all of those are examples of, no, let's at least put our cards on the table and say, you can't escape the suffering. That animal doesn't want to die. It wants to live. So let's not make pretend that that's what it wants to do.
100%.
And so if we can shed at least the bad faith and have a quote good faith discussion.
Yeah.
That's where it starts.
That's a huge and great point. I love the cards on the table, because I there again, like if I were to have, and I've made this mistake in my past with like the air of moral superiority. I kill an animal. Like I just go out there and I find this animal. It eats naturally. It lives naturally, and I remove it from that landscape. And isn't that in itself the best way to go and get your food? If I were to take that toward and blow that up to the environment, I'm wearing, textiles. I have, rubber in my boots. I'm driving a combustion engine vehicle out to go and get this thing. There's so many, lay those cards out on the table, be like, yes, and I feel that way, I think, about veganism too. I mean, if you were to lay the cards out on the table as you just have and say, like, I understand that it is impossible to fully mitigate all these impacts on the world around us. Let's lay that out on the table and be like, okay, we can probably all agree on that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of where hunters, a lot of times, and vegans can start. Like we kind of start from the same place.
Right.
And just like see the world around me. I want to know it better. I'm going to try this way. This is like a adaptation of eating meat in a way. For a lot of like new and adult onset hunters, or what we call them, people that are hunting up in their 30s. It's a way to like find themselves. It's a way to solve the same problems that I think that you're trying to solve.
Right.
So there's just a lot of similarities in it, but I love the idea of laying the cards out on the table, the airs of superiority that we have in the hunting space and conservation and eating the meat and the organic nature of the meat, whatever. I think I could poke holes in those all day, and I often do.
Right.
And so in the same way that like you can be self-critical of your community, I can do the same thing in hunting and lay those self-critical cards on the table and be like, it ain't perfect.
Yeah.
Boy, it ain't even close.
Yeah.
And then we can get to the root of like philosophically why we're doing what we're doing.
Right. And it just dawned on me that something else that's interesting is, like I said, I really want to, as much as I have for the past few years sort of made these critiques of a certain kind of veganism, I also, so in doing that, I want to say, I also feel protective, and I don't want to pile on because, as I mentioned, vegans are kind of like vilified and seen as wackos, but also in certain parts of the culture, hunters are seen as wackos. Right? So
I feel you, bro.
Yeah, it's
like trophy hunting and that like really liberal, moral superior vegan are kind of in this same, pretty much in the same bucket, depending on which one you
So
want
if you
to
ask, there's probably I'm again, this isn't scientific. I would imagine there are a lot of Americans. If you said, what do you think about vegans? Oh, they're the extreme wackos. Oh, and what do you, same person, what do you think about hunters? Oh, they just like to shoot shit and kill things, right?
See that guy with the elephant tail? Yeah, Donald Trump Jr. had an elephant tail.
Right.
Like, well, sure he did, but that's just one guy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you see Pamela Anderson throwing blood on people. Yeah, but that's just one person, right? Yeah. So I think it's something that I've certainly, and I think in your work you have too. It's just like you kind of could turn inward. And that some of the conversations within the communities, these communities that are this tight, are insular, and you need to kind of turn out for a minute, look around, and go like, why don't people dig this as much as I do?
Right.
Like, why do they think the way they? Why does the common person, just independent individual, if you were to posit those things to them, why do they think the way they do?
Yeah.
Why
yeah.
is it they think hunters are a bunch of redneck shooting
Right,
fools
right.
and vegans are a bunch of,
Yeah.
they're walking around protesting with buckets of blood? It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why? And what can we do to help
Right.
those things?
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're already in the same, we've arrived at the same place this quickly. But I think that's my main question. If you were to, in your own mind, kind of like lay out the similarities between a hunter like Steve Ranella, who you met and were a part of his Stars in the Sky documentary, and even what you know about me and what we do at our company, would you, if a vegan said, "What do you know about these guys?" How would you lay it out in a way that that maybe they would understand there is a different version of?
Well, I would say that from my and once again, it's a limited perspective. I'm not like in the hunting community.
And I'm not hunting for a compliment. I just
right. No. I get it. But what I would say is that what I discovered, because I've known, as I mentioned, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I've known hunters. I've been to people's homes where there's like, you go in the room and there's like the bear, there's all the heads on the walls and all the trophy hunting. And one of the things I discovered about Ranella when I went out there to Montana was, and looked into that world. And then when I heard about the podcast and listened to you, Ben, what I was surprised about was the sort of thoughtfulness. Like, it wasn't merely the stereotype of like, basically you're just an arm of the NRA and you are basically here to promote guns and killing. That's an easy route. But what I discovered in hearing your podcast, and even you and I had talked before the podcast, before I even agreed to go meet Steve and be in the film, was I was wary. I thought like, oh, this is going to be an ambush. They're going to get an animal rights philosopher, edit the film to make him look like a lunatic.
Yeah.
But so I didn't find that. So when I talked to Steve and we had conversation before we did the film, I felt like this is a pretty thoughtful guy. We disagree about certain important, what I would consider like ethical implications of what we do, but this is the kind of person where I felt like when Steve and I were having a conversation, he was fully tuned in to I felt like he was like, I want to learn about what you, like the way you think. He wasn't like, I didn't get the impression that I just want to throw this vegan dude in front of the camera and make him look like an idiot. So, and likewise, we just met, but in listening to your podcast a few times, I thought the thing I think about is, with regard to your being a hunter, is here's what I mean, my first impression was like, oh, there are hunters out there who are actually thoughtful and think about this stuff rather than kind of stereotype where no matter what, in my experience, I have, and as you have probably with animal rights people, is like, there's a sort of, you circle the wagons, and any kind of question like, well, does wildlife management really, like, does your license, is that the best way to help animals? And there's like the party line. But what I heard with you on yours and Steve is like, not that you might disagree, but you, and here's what I tell my students in my critical thinking class. I'll say, and I teach an animal rights class, I say the same thing. I say, when you come into this class in September and then you leave in December, I'm not interested in your views from September. You actually change. What I'm more interested in is if you come in September with certain views about animals, and I teach at Chico State, which is in Northern California. It's a big ag community, a big hunting community.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
And I have a lot of students, because my class, I teach a class called Confronting the Animal, which is in the GE pathway they call food studies. So I have all these ag animal science hunters taking my class.
4-H kids
going, yeah, exactly. Like, what the hell? But here's what I tell them, and this goes to what we were talking about, is that if I had to choose, if you left in December and you still felt the same way about hunting as when you came in, or you still felt the same way about meat eating, but you actually had reasons, and you could think about, now I understand why I believe this, or now I understand why this is more valuable to me. That to me is more important than saying, oh, in 15 weeks I'm going to make you into a vegan.
Oh yeah.
And so when working, listening to you and talking to Steve, it's like having that kind of thoughtful conversation where you interrogate, like, why do I do this? And are my beliefs lining up with the world? As a vegan, I might think, when I plop down my money and I go to the butcher's son and get a quote chicken sandwich, am I really helping the planet? As opposed to just going on autopilot and going, oh yeah, it's vegan, so it's good. Yeah. Oh, it's hunting, so it's bad.
Yeah, it's like this intellectual weightlifting you're doing. I would say that people are like, why are you going over there? Mm-hmm. Why are you going over to the belly of the beast?
Right.
Like Berkeley, California, because I was like, I spent all this time talking into a little microphone.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out if I'm right or wrong, or trying to judge how to approach a lot of different situations. And I'm like, if I can't take these beliefs over and test them on people that I respect and say, like, let's throw it back and forth and let's see what I can learn.
Yeah.
If I can't do that, then I'm wrong. Like,
right.
Then if I'm just going to come and say, well, why is hunting great? Well, you know what, Robert, conservation.
Right.
You know what else? The meat. You know what else? The adventure. Oh, it's also fun. It's really fun to do. Like you said, when you went hunting as a kid, you had a good time.
Yeah.
So those are the party lines, and those party lines I believe in. But I also believe there's depth behind them, and there's holes in them that I'd like to fill in.
Right.
And how better to fill them in than to run right at them and just see if they stand up, because I don't want to be sitting around 30 years. I've met a lot of hunters. Not a lot, but I've met a number of hunters I very much respect that are getting up in age, 67 years old, and quit hunting and just start taking pictures of animals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
so I would ask myself, why is that?
Right.
Is that going to be me?
Yeah.
Am I going to get to a point in my life where I've killed enough? And why would that be if that is me?
Right.
Like, why would I get to a point where I'm 65 and I'm just done with it? What's that say about the practice?
Right.
And so those questions, I think, are key to either one side being on the right, or at least intellectually sound.
Yeah.
With what we do, for sure.
Yeah, I think part of it is being critical of.
Yeah.
Always being critical of whatever your beliefs. When you're fully entrenched and you think I've now reached the point where I don't need to question anymore, then you're in danger at that point.
That's a great point. Yeah,
you're in danger.
Yeah. Then I think you see that, and I think you see it on the internet, man. People, the outrage machine is
no. The internet is. It's a bastion. I mean, anytime you have anonymity, and then you could that's dangerous. Buddy. People,
they get you. And what's worse is we listen to them.
Yeah,
but that's a tough.
Wait, I wanted to go back to that other thing you're talking about, chicken, because
let's get to the chicken thing, because why? And I want an answer to this that makes sense to me. I will pursue it. It's like, well, I go in there and I got a lot of messages from people on Instagram as well. It's like, why?
Why is it called chicken?
Why is it called chicken or steak? Why is it a steak and cheese if it's not steak? Isn't that on its face? It seems disingenuous. It seems confusing for no reason. And I did learn in going in there that a lot of people that live on what we think is a vegan diet, like you said earlier, don't like the label. So my assumption is like there's something in there that I need to understand. But I didn't just read the menu. I'm like, it seems strange.
Yeah, and there is. I mean, just. Again, you and I are part of what we're doing is like breaking the notion that there's a monolith on any of these issues, right? There's not, there may be, a consensus among hunters, but it's not a monolith. And same thing in the animal rights world. There are plenty of people who think, you know what, we shouldn't even name it chicken. Like, it's a vegan place. It's a sandwich. It's modeled after, a chicken thing, sandwich, kind of, you said it was a grinder. But it's not chicken, so don't call it chicken.
I would eat it just the same if it was like a wheat grinder.
Yeah,
I'd think, it's good. Was it peppers? That's good.
Yeah,
I didn't need to be coerced into eating that sandwich. I would have eaten it. I was there because I knew what it was, and I'm like, well, I'm down to try whatever, and also it tastes really good. So I don't give a shit. What's in it? So what's the?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number. I know this is actually, Ben. This is I think it's a lot more complicated, and I totally dig where I totally get. Let me just say, I can acknowledge that there can be an aspect of this where you think, wait, is this intentionally deceptive? So you have some person, let's imagine they wander in off the street and they don't know. It's just
Because
Butcher's
it's
Son.
a nice restaurant.
It's really nice.
There's a lot of nice looking people in there.
Nice looking people.
They're not like I thought they might be. A bunch of pale people can barely get out of their chairs.
Well, vegans, they're just never get enough nutrition.
I went in there with a bunch of B12 pills and nobody would take them. It's weird. I go in there and it's like a very nice restaurant. It's like you go to this thing, you would not, and even to eat it, you're like, yeah, okay, this is like a kind of like a Steakums back when I was a kid,
Yeah.
And so that's all there for what reason? What's the facade?
Yeah, and I think so. Let me just say, I acknowledge that. I can totally get where someone might look at that and say, "What the hell are you trying to like deceive people and make right?" But let
me before you get on.
Yeah.
And I think this is what I was thinking of while I was eating this chicken grinder. I was like eating this. I'm like this poor wheat based chicken. It was puzzles that made me laugh. But there's also there's a thing we do in hunting that we've discussed on Steve's podcast and this one as well. It's just like we say harvest an animal as a way, as nomenclature kind of to put up a facade for some people. Like I harvested that elk. Well, you didn't. You killed it. You should say that you killed it. That's my belief. I think a lot of people use the term harvest to soften the end activity. So that's my wondering. I'm like, we do that in our world to kind of soften the blow of what's exactly going on here. I'm like, is this what they're doing? Are they trying to soften that it's a vegan place? So that's where I started in my own mind.
No, that's great. And I think and Ben, I'm glad you brought that up because earlier we talked about the issue of like not living in bad faith. And I do think that I talk about this in other places where, using the word harvest, it's a euphemism. Let's just come out and say, like, I agree 100%. Let's just say it's killing. Harvesting is a euphemism for what's happening.
It's killing. And I tell people, you know what I do, what I've done hundreds of times in my life, and what you do when you kill an animal, one of the first things that you do to dress it, you cut its asshole out. Mm-hmm. I've cut out hundreds of assholes. Am I supposed to like just gloss over that I'm ripping hearts out and I'm pulling, intestines out and I'm cutting tongues out to eat and like that?
Well, we can come up with a new
way for cutting the asshole out.
You're removing
holing.
You're holing, or you're removing you're disorganizing.
Disorganized.
Yes,
I like that. But disorganization.
Yes.
So, but do I need to come up with? I'm not coming up with words for those. Right. I'm just not talking about it.
Right.
Like I'm harvesting the animal.
Yes.
No, I'm shooting it. I'm walking over to it. I'm ripping its guts out. I'm cutting its asshole out. I'm splitting its pelvis.
Yes.
I understand that.
Yes.
And I think the gritty nature of that helps me understand the animal. Helps me understand what I'm doing in my part in the process. So I feel that's important to see it.
Yes.
And talk about it and not rip it away by saying, "Oh, harvest," or not talking about the gritty, bloody nature of being a hunter. I mean, it's unavoidable. So why try to avoid it?
No, Ben. I mean, that's you're not living in bad faith, and that's not common. But going back, so look, let me just say, I think this is actually it's a little more complicated. The surface critique, I understand. It's like you guys are just deceiving. It's not chicken. Call it, seitan based or wheat, right? So, but let me try this. See what you think of this.
Hit me. I'm going to pull up the picture I took of the menu. And
okay.
I'll let you.
So now here's a couple of things. So I don't know if you're familiar with. There is an entire strand. There are within the world of animal rights philosophy, ethical theory. There's different strands. Now, there's a woman who wrote a book. She's a friend of mine in 1990, a very influential book called "The Sexual Politics of Meat." Her name is Carol J. Adams. She's big time. Now, she has an interesting theory about the relationship between. I won't even get into the sexualization and sort of the sexualization and feminization of food products and animal products. That's not the reason I'm bringing up her book. The reason I'm bringing up her book is because she uses this really important concept that she calls the absent referent, and this is where I think the answer to the chicken thing is going to be found in. So let's think about chicken is an interesting example, but let's go back to you mentioned steak. So steak is a dead cow. right? So let's think about the production of this object. So you go to a restaurant, you order this object. It has a name on the menu, steak. They bring it to your plate. It's cooked, it's dressed, it's all nice, right? And it smells great. Now, that, and this is Carol's work on the absent referent, that object there used to be a subject, used to be a living being who had a subjective life, who had experiences, who had joys, who was a cow and licked its baby. It had all this stuff.
Like standing in the sun. That was nice.
Right. It had all these things, right? So now we get this object that is an object of literal consumption. Its purpose is to be consumed by humans. And so the referent, meaning the thing to which that steak refers, the living thing, that steak refers to the cow back earlier in the line. That cow is gone from the whole experience. Not only is the cow missing from the experience, it's not even called a cow, it's called something else, right? Yeah. So it's an invisifying, or it's a wiping away of the subjectivity and the sentience of that original being. So now you have this notion, say, of like you go there and you order like a steak and it's not really steak. So when I talked to Carol and I had a discussion about you're out here in California, you're out here in the Bay Area. There's a woman named Miyoko, and Miyoko produces all vegan dairy products. And I got to tell you, they're really good. The vegan butter, Miyoko's vegan. This is not a commercial. I'm just telling you, it's really good. As someone who's eaten butter, for many years and who stopped. So Carol and I were having this conversation, and I said, she said, "Oh, this Miyoko's cheese is really this." She said, "Miyoko's cheese," and I said, sort of pejoratively, I was like, "You mean like the fake cheese?" And she said to me, "No. It's cheese. The notion that cheese has to come from, either a goat or like we are actually upsetting the paradigm. So when we say this is cheese, what we're saying to you is we're trying to change the concept of what cheese is. So when you look at this object that it's made from like coconut milk, however, it's made in plant-based, to call it fake cheese is to capitulate to the sort of speciesist anthropocentric paradigm that says cheese has to come from an animal, a goat, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a kind of political act in saying, no, motherfucker, this is cheese. I'm calling it cheese. Yeah. If you think cheese requires dairy, that's welcome to the new world. Cheese doesn't have to be dairy. Of course, in response to things like Miyoko, the dairy industry they're all across the country, right? They're passing these labeling laws. You can't say this thing is cheese. You can't use the word, even like soy milk, right? You can't use the word milk. You have to say it's soy derivative, right? So now what I'm trying to say here or argue is that calling that chicken thing chicken, you could see it as deceptive, but I think there's a deeper way to think of it. There's a way in which that's a political act to say, this is chicken. Accept it, baby. This is chicken. And you might want to go, no, it's deceptive. Chicken is this animal. And you go, no, this is also chicken, because you see, when I go to a restaurant and I order real chicken, that is an object that has been separated from the chicken. So the fact that it carries the same word, the chicken from the living being to the chicken on my plate, what I have on my plate is radically far away from the chicken. It's from the animal. And so I think part of what's going on, at least what I want to say, is this is a fuck you to the paradigm, to say, welcome to the new vegan world. It's chicken, like it or not. It's not deceptive. It's meant to push you to rethink what chicken, what pork is. So I think that's where it's coming
very
from.
Existential.
It is existential.
Yeah.
It is forcing you to confront what the hell, why do I believe what I believe, and why do I think that chicken has to be that thing, and is that thing on my plate when I go to a quote, regular non-vegan restaurant and I order a hamburger is most hamburger, other than those that are, let's just say a vast majority of hamburger come from cows who underwent stress and were slaughtered and in suboptimal conditions, despite what Temple Grandin wants to say, and then they're ground up and they're put on a plate. That's what hamburger is.
Yeah.
Right? And so I get this object that I call hamburger, and what Butcher Son wants to say is, we have hamburgers too. They're not that.
And I understand what you're saying. I would just tell them, like, yep, you got a very, like, that approach is very existential and probably hard for most people to pick up, or almost impossible just for the regular person to go in and pick all that existential, meandering up. But they would pick it up if, like, chicken substitute or wheat-based, supposed to be chicken sandwich. Like, this is a replacement for what you normally, isn't this good? It's like almost if you just said, to me, if you came to me and you said, if you only have to eat this, if you would replace this with chicken, because I don't really eat a whole ton of chicken, because my wife and I have a big argument at home because she would buy chicken. I'm like, well, don't buy chicken at the store. That's not what we do. We eat wild game. That's all we eat at home. That's what we do. She's like, well, you haven't killed enough
chickens,
turkeys, man.
Turkey, yeah.
You need to kill more
doing
turkeys.
Your job, man.
Yeah, do your job, you fool. So I would say, okay, well, then next year I need to kill 10 turkeys and this many pheasants and this many quail to kind of offset that thing. But I wouldn't, I don't know if I can compare that, but that's just me trying to say, I understand white meat is something that I'm going to consume, and I'm trying to change that up. Inversely to the restaurant, you're like, wow, if you just said this is a possibility to replace the chicken that you eat.
Yeah, but hold on, Ben. So
it's like there's a replacement theory there, right?
I get it, but so let me just clarify. I don't think I agree with you. You said something interesting. You're like, look, the average person is not going to do these kind of like philosophical existential gymnastics. But what I want to say is that you don't have to. So you don't have to go through this whole thought process. It's just it can be seen as a political act. So let me give you an example. You mentioned that you have a small child. Mm-hmm. So let's fast forward 30 years. You have a son or a daughter?
Son.
So now your son is your age. He's in the mid-30s. And now he goes, "Hey, want some chicken?" And it's this stuff you ate at the butcher's son.
Yeah.
And everyone says, and then people go like, chicken, they used to eat those, stick them in cages. So now look at what has happened over time. And this happens in a lot of justice movements, is that a term gets reappropriated, and there's no reason to go, this is a chicken substitute, because in the future, if that's what chicken is, that's what chicken becomes. And now look what you've done. If you're a vegan, right? You've maintained the concept and the food thing, the concept of the food you're eating, and you've decoupled it from that animal that's been suffering. So what I want to say is, I don't think you need to do all that. All you got to do is see it as they're trying to change. They're subtly trying to change things. So in the future, it's acceptable to say, "Hey, do you want some cheese?" And they bring out some whatever vegan cheese, rather than going, "Do you want some cheese substitute?"
Yeah.
At that point, you're saying this isn't real cheese, and they want to go, "No, dude, I'm not gonna go down that road."
Yeah, I would imagine like that seems like, I say I disagree with that. And it seems weird to me, just for the same reason that harvest and kill seem weird. Like, why don't we just say this is a substitute? We're trying to substitute this for chicken. We believe that most chicken that you eat, or any chicken that you're going to eat, was killed and suffered.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, it can't free range. Let it run around the yard, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It had to suffer to get to your plate.
Yeah.
It's kind of a thing that's based on vision. Like, I didn't see it get here; it had to suffer to get here, right? And so I would say, just say, and I would tell the butcher son, like, I think it would be just as effective just to say straight out. You wouldn't have to say substitute, but you could just say wheat-based sandwich. Or it's almost like to give up that, your belief. I believe that no one should eat chicken ever, but I got to be real subtle about it to get it out of there. I got to be real subtle to kind of like over time change the meaning of the thing.
Yes.
Rather than just being flat out honest with people and be like, don't eat the chicken, and let's have that. Let's as you said, let's be fair and have good faith in the way we approach it, rather than subtly trying to move it to a point where there's a 30-year-old person that doesn't understand what chicken used to be or what chicken is, and it's kind of changed in bad faith over time. Just tell me what it is. I don't care. In fact, if it's good, it's actually, to me, it's like I could go home and tell my wife, you know what? Instead of getting chicken, why don't we get this thing here? What is this grinder thing?
Right.
Why don't we get the grinder?
Yeah.
And we'll vac seal that shit up. and whenever I've been a terrible hunter and we run out of turkey, then we'll eat this the substitute that tastes like chicken. Our kid will love it. He'll never know. Right. You won't have to go to the store and participate in factory farming. I'm not going to feel bad as a shitty hunter. Yeah. And we've got this thing here that can help us. And so I see when I'm eating that, I'm like, dude, you guys are missing the freaking point here. Yeah. Like, this is somebody like me who believes my consumption is very important. I would take part in the chicken grinder every day. You know,
and some products, some vegan products, they, for example, I won't say the brand, but they have chicken patties. It's like CHIKN, right? So it's like
stop it.
It's not chicken.
Just give me
it's
the
some
dope.
other thing.
Because I would argue, like I said, I would argue as a meat eater that I would much rather eat the vegan version of chicken as it stands now than eat actual chicken.
Yeah.
It would be either wild turkey or a plant-based replacement. That's cool. I love to eat plants.
Yeah.
I eat them all the time.
Right.
You know, so let's give me the chance to get at that. And it even removes my own kind of, my wife would be like, well, that says chicken on it. Like, it's not chicken. And then I have to explain the existential crisis. I'd much rather be like, this is some wheat shit or whatever, jackfruit or whatever it is. Yeah. It tastes really good. You're not going to worry about it.
Yeah.
This is what a jackfruit is. Just eat it. And she'd be like, yeah, that's great.
No, I get it. And look, I'm with you. I see what you're saying. Again, I just think it's a way of seeing it as a political statement, as a subversive act.
Yeah.
I think that.
And I don't think it's necessary. I would argue that like veganism in itself is like, it's not a bad thing, and especially in the way that you present it. So it's like, let's just embrace it in a way that, because there's a lot of people like me that don't feel like, if you're telling me this is chicken, what also aren't you telling me?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
What other submersive things are you trying to get me to believe?
Yeah.
You know, it seems disingenuous. But I did enjoy to go back to the butcher son. Great job on the chicken sandwich. I
gotta say,
I ate half of it and took the other half to the hotel and ate the other half.
The sandwiches are so big.
They're giant.
I was there not long ago. I got it was like a Reuben, which I think is like, I guess.
Here, I had the menu. People were like, what are you talking? This is insane. I'm like, no, it's not insane. It's good food.
It's actually good.
If they would just say like, good food made of shit you don't normally eat. They had like hot garlic, lemon, chicken pesto, barbecue pulled pork. And that's like yuba. Is that how you say that? Yuba? Hot roast beef. Doesn't say what that is. And it doesn't even say what it is. It just says sliced sourdough with grilled onions, little gems lettuce. It says like all the ingredients, but not what the beef actually is. And that was confusing to me. I'm like, what is it?
Right.
Tell me. I'd love to, because I'll be making it at home. You know, if I run out of, if I miss an elk this year, I'll be eating.
But if you went to a restaurant, Ben, and like a lot of people don't know. Once again, I'm kind of talking out my ass. But what I'm trying to say is, there are people.
Oh, me too.
There are people who don't know. Does everyone know that like beef is a cow and pork? I mean, I'm sure most people do. But what I'm getting at is, if you go to a regular restaurant and says like all beef hot dog, does it say really dead cow? And you just go, it's beef, right?
Yeah, and I mean, but then you would say like, if people are calling it beef to make a political statement, no. They're just that's what they call it.
Right, but I'm saying I agree with it. You're saying, look, I'd like to know what the hell this thing is made of.
And I think a lot of people that I presented that to on Instagram were that too. Like, what is jackfruit? Is it good? Can I cook with it?
Yeah.
Could I, if I run out of venison, can I crack that thing open and have a nice venison facsimile for dinner? Like, I don't know. It's not on the menu. So it's just one of those other things that, for me, would make it more approachable.
Yeah, I got
For me, would make it less like you're trying to tell me, make the statement. Because you're not totally wrong.
Yeah.
And even in this conversation, I'm having a bit of like, oh, I would eat that shit. I should figure out what that is.
Yeah.
Because I only killed 4 turkeys this year, and I was aiming to kill 10. So eventually, and even for me, my wife and I get like the preciousness of the meat. We got a thing called an Instapot. And
the Instapot.
Yeah, man. The Instapot, which I like. I like the Instapot. I like that I live in an age where Instapot's a thing.
Yeah.
She put some turkey in the Instapot. She has a little child running around. Happened to forget it was in there. Came out not so good. And I always get mad at that. I can't help but have some anger towards that. And she's like, why are you so mad? Like, because I can't just go out and get that now.
Right.
Like that was a thing that I can't replace.
Yeah.
And so it becomes much more of a precious thing. And if some real smart vegan at the butcher's son was like, hey, man, I have found a replacement.
Right.
And it tastes great.
Yeah.
And your kids will eat it and your wife will eat it. And you don't have to participate in any kind of bullshit Purdue. I'm like, oh, okay.
Right.
Sweet. Let's go.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
Put some peppers on it.
Right.
Let's hit it. So that's something. I'm glad I went there and I'm glad I have those conversations. But let's get to, more of your academic stuff and some of the things that you said in the paper. And I think that, like I said, I'm reading a lot of this stuff. I'm like, man, there's a whole lot in here that I can get with. You went through in there, and I said it's been years since you've written this, but kind of what your stated support for ethical veganism, and kind of the reasons that you got there. And and as I looked at it, it's weighty, it's heavy. You said, in your stated work, that you support ethical veganism as an empowering response to the cost in terms of violence, suffering, exploitation, domination, objectification, commodification of animals for food, the destruction of the environment, the displacement of animals in the process, as well as the cost of our own health and the health of the planet. Then these things call for immediate, effective, and decisive action at the personal, collective, and policy levels. I mean, that's...
I wrote that? Jeez. I was on a good day.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, to read that, I read that, I'm like, yeah. I'm with you.
Right.
Like, there's not a whole lot that I can pull back from in that. Like, I want all the things that you want. So talk, as I said, it's been a while since those words were strung together, but I imagine that still typifies.
Oh yeah. No, I haven't deviated from that. No.
So just talk about the whole of what moves you to this, because we know now that you've eaten meat, you've hunted and done things, killed things, and that paragraph was powerful to me to read.
Well, I think, first of all, as far as I think the motivation for ethical veganism for most of us who are ethical vegans is that we have a desire to decrease unnecessary suffering in the world. So, I walk, whatever lifespan I have this kind of footprint I leave, and hopefully I can be as low impact as possible. Of course, none of this is perfect, right? Like, I drove here. It's not solely about killing. Like, I drove here today to meet you. How many insects I must have killed? Hundreds of them on the freeway. So I'm killing just driving here. I have an automobile. It's using fossil fuel. So this is what I say in the paper. What Lori and I say is that we're all involved in this endeavor of destruction. Now, does that mean that I just throw up my hands, go, fuck it, it doesn't matter, just eat whatever you want, just drive fly everywhere, right? No, it doesn't mean that, right? So the connection, so if I'm motivated by this kind of imperative to say, I want to be as gentle as I can, I want to cause as little suffering as possible, if it's possible, okay? Whatever I can do, whenever I make decisions, especially as a consumer in an affluent, the most affluent country on the planet in history, what kind of choices can I make that will reflect the ethic of non-malfeasance, of decreasing suffering?
Yeah. O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/meateater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/meateater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
When I look at the way that food is produced, particularly with regard to animal-based food, as I mentioned in there, what I see is on so many levels, there's so much suffering and there's so much destruction. The animals themselves are, as I mentioned, there's violence involved. And I'll use chicken as an example, since we were talking about chicken. I mean, chicken are the most abused animals on the planet. The number of chickens, it's hard to wrap your mind around. Just in the United States, there's about 9 billion chickens, right? So more than the entire population of the earth. Planetary-wise, it's like 40 billion chickens a year. These are annual, figures. So the way the chickens are treated is abominable. There's no one who has a heart would ever wish that upon a sentient being, right?
Yeah.
So when I say that there's violence involved, there's domination involved, there is commodification, right? Commodification meaning that, and this goes to what we talked about a little bit earlier, it's like the sentient being, chickens are, and this is what I like to think, we think like, oh, chickens are not that smart, but Ben, just think about all the organisms that live on the planet Earth, right? There's like microorganisms, there's little things that live on like our eyelids, and then there's like human beings, right? In the grand scheme, there's like carrots and grass. Chickens are pretty fucking smart.
Oh yeah,
right. I mean, like compared to all that shit, right? Like
and they're
trees.
pretty ruthless too. I mean,
they can be ruthless. I don't know. Who would be the most ruthless species? We could probably have a debate about that.
We should. That's what we're here to do.
Or a discussion.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my point is that the chickens are commodified in that they're turned into things to be. Their sole value is the value they have in markets to create profit and stuff like this.
Right.
So that process of taking a living sentient being and dominating it and perpetrating a kind of violence against it and commodifying it, that just doesn't align with my values of wanting to walk on the earth and decrease suffering. So with that aspect, I feel like I just don't want to take that chicken into my body. It's not something that I could even bring myself to do. Does it taste good? Have I eaten millions of pounds of chicken? Yeah. Is it delicious? Yeah, but that's not the point, right?
Right.
Now, with regard to that passage that you read, the system that produces that chicken, let's say, that brings it to the table at the restaurant or brings it to the supermarket, that system, in my estimation, speaking of is ruthless. It's ruthless. It's at the expense of not only the health of the planet, but our personal health, right?
Yeah.
So you have this industry that's producing in the United States 9 billion chickens a year, polluting our water, polluting our air. It's one of the highest fossil fuel producing products is animal products, right? And draining the aquifers, increasing antibiotic resistant, organisms. So then I look and I'm like, wait, this isn't only about me feeling like I don't want to cause suffering to that chicken because I want to be as nonviolent as possible. But here I am contributing to the destruction of the planet. I'm like, wow. So my consumer choices as a consumer, even if I'm a vegan, right? Anyone who's a consumer has to have this kind of, at least I believe, has to have this kind of mindset. And then there's issues of health. And I mean, and we haven't talked about this, but I know you're going to agree with this. It's like, just take human beings, Homo sapiens, we've been here 250,000 years, which is a blink in the eye of the eye in geologic time. Mm-hmm. And then, like, how long have we been eating shit? Like, we rip open a plastic thing and eat this shit and then throw it and then go to this store and get this. Like, that's got to be, 100 years or something?
Well, it's like the way it breaks down is I think it's like 100,000. I always get this number wrong. I'm pretty sure it's 100. I always think it's crazy to think of, but 100,000 generations of people lived as hunter-gatherers. Mm-hmm. Then you get into the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
Basically, there's about 2 or 3 generations there. And then processed foods, there's about 2 or 3 generations in there. There's a lot of play, I'm sure, in that in that run. But that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the matriculation of time. Like, all of time we were one thing.
Yeah.
And now we've found ourselves in only 6 versions of people.
Yes.
So far away from the thing we always were that there was so many luxuries that we just never had.
Right.
And so removed from our own humanity in so many ways, not just the way we eat, but all the things we do. That it's, it's strange to think of these crises and, self-identity. Like, what are we and why are we here? And, and so for me, that's led to a lot of things. But I'll tell you what, I mean, hunting led me to garden. I never gardened before I was before I hunted. And I was looking like, oh, that's cool to know where that came from.
Yeah.
Boy, I better. Why would I be so involved in knowing where this piece of steak came from and then not know where that carrot came from or not know, and hopefully, once my wife and I are done having children, we'll have chickens and other things that help to mitigate those things. So it's kind of led me down the path of, isn't it hypocritical for me to, do this, like to say, hold up my hand and be like, look at my meat. I know where that came from and it ate grass on that ridge over there. And but this carrot, fuck, I don't know.
Right.
Or this, this macaroni and cheese, don't know. And so as you're saying, I mean, there's just something about knowing that we're engines of consumption. We wake up in the morning, we just consume. We consume the air, we consume everything. And there's layers to our consumption. If you can peel back a few of the shitty layers of your consumption and get down to the raw form of what you're eating, why wouldn't you?
Right.
Is my question. Because it seems fucking lazy. Well, not supposed to cuss anymore. People don't.
Oh, really?
We'll beep
I
that
didn't
out.
know that.
Were you cussing? I wasn't even paying attention.
I dropped a few F-bombs just
me
because
too.
I've heard F-bombs on your podcast.
I know. I was told recently that
Oh, sorry.
I think I got kids. I probably shouldn't say that F word. But it'll take me a while to get out of it. But anyway, fuck it. We're like that's the type of being that we are. Like we've reached a point now intellectually where we can kind of start peeling back the layers of our consumption, where when we were hunter-gatherers, we didn't have the luxury to peel back those layers. And so and I told our animal rights folks the other day, I said, I think history is progressive. And I don't think that I know it. I've read it.
Yeah.
And I've experienced it and seen that, the progressive idea, let's move past slavery, let's move past, Jim Crow, let's move, like we eventually get there. So there is a part of me that wonders whether, and Steve openly wondered it in Stars in the Sky, the documentary you were part of, is there a time we move past this hunting thing?
Yeah.
Or is it so barbaric? I would argue this, like, it's not, in my opinion. Like, there's barbaric parts of it, but its intent is not barbaric. Yeah. And it does a lot of good for wildlife. So I think that's probably where we should get to next. Like when you think of hunting, we could probably get together and whack factory farms over the head all day.
Yeah.
And in fact,
that's low hanging.
That's low hanging fruit. In fact, I said yesterday that I've always found it hilarious if you would go to like a Chick-fil-A and inside the bag is a dead chicken part. This is some fucking thing you pulled off a chicken.
Yeah.
On the bag is a cartoon chicken. Like what?
Happy chicken.
Like a chicken that's like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
And they have like these cartoon cows that are saying, eat more chicken. You're like, are we so divorced from the idea of what that thing is that we would, like make it into a cartoon? I get that. But why would we put it on the outside of the bag where the dead chicken is? We must not understand. Or
we might again, this can go back to the bad faith. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so by employing things like cartoons or having the cows on the billboard saying eat more chicken, we can laugh at it, but I think the laughing it belies this other level of discomfort, because in 2019 most people know you don't have a chicken who was running around in a yard like in the old right. So I think it there's something about the making it into humor, or trying an attempt, what I would call a sick and twisted attempt at humor is to diffuse the kind of cognitive dissonance or the
yeah.
But anyway, so I think we agree on that. And just to put the closure on this is, before we move to the next thing, is so when I think about veganism and I see the interconnectedness between the individual animals suffering and dominated in its violence and the commodification, and then the degradation of the environment with industrial food production and animal agriculture, and then the health aspects, and then walking into a store and ripping open a thing and throwing it's like we as human beings are so far away from anything that would be considered I would say like non-violent or peaceful. There's aspects of all of this consumption that are just fucking shit up.
Yeah.
And so what I want to argue in that paper is, as a vegan, every opportunity I can, within reason, right, I want to try to decrease my suffering impact. You can't, realistically, and this is one of the things that some philosophers argue is a problem, right, is like, they call it's too demanding. So if you really want to live like this, how could you even like move out of this little room? Because I'm going to walk out there, I'm going to maybe step on it. Like anything I do at some point is going to interact with some kind of suffering and cause some kind of suffering. But I don't think, and this is the thing is, veganism is not, to me, as I mentioned, as you reading the paper, it's not about perfection. There is a notion, like people will say like, oh, you're not really vegan because you take antibiotics. But no one at least who's thoughtful about veganism says that veganism is perfectly withdrawing yourself from the cycle of death and suffering. No one's saying that. Veganism to me is saying, again, is how can I decrease unnecessary suffering, right? So I accept that there's going to be suffering and death caused by my choices. I just happen to think that by not contributing directly to animal suffering, as you said, we can beat up factory farming for days, but by not contributing to that, I have a lighter footprint. Now, when it comes to what you're mentioning with regard to hunting,
well, let me stop you to say that and this has always struck me this way, and it's not. I don't think it's different with the way that you think of veganism, and the way I think of hunting. Maybe the way I think of hunting is different than other folks. But with what you just said and what you just kind of described as veganism for me, you could take the word veganism, remove it from all the things you just said, put the word hunting in there, and be the same damn thing. And it just the way that I think of hunting, I think of, and it's almost as if veganism would be if we started back to back, agreeing in the way that I think we agree. Yeah. I don't know if you we'll see if we agree in like what you said. My feeling about hunting now in like the modern sense, because I can't go back and be a subsistence hunter. One of my goals in life is try to understand that really, really and truly, but I can't. So I think if we started back to back and we understood the reasons why we would go and do a thing, I feel by killing one elk, I am not only participating in there being more elk, but participating in less cows dying, right? Like if I went and just I just went to the store and bought a steak, I get 120 pounds of meat ish off of elk. If I kill a moose, it's more than that, so I can make that into sausage. So that's all the sausage I don't have to go to the store and buy, but I'm also understanding that I take part in this great system that we've set up. It's one of the fallacies in the hunting logic is it's not voluntary. If you want to hunt, you got to pay. And it's not altruistic. You're just taking part in the process, but the process leads to something good. So I think of it as if we were standing back to back and both understanding like we want to do good, we want to decrease suffering, we want to decrease these like exploitative ways of our world and this disconnection from what we really are on this planet, and maybe disconnecting ourselves from ourselves a little bit and our own impact, that I'm walking backwards and you're walking forwards. Like I'm walking back towards our humanity for millions of years and back towards communing with nature and being a part of this, being a real and tangible part of the natural world and the circle of life and the predator and prey relationship. And just taking part in that as a way to kind of walk back and to also escape the same thing you're trying to escape. I'm just walking back towards what we used to be. You're just walking forward to something we never were. And as we get further away from each other, that's where we forget to turn and look back and be like, hey, remember where we started? Remember where we started in that same spot where we're both like,
yeah,
we don't like exploitation. We don't like commodification. We don't like eat shit that came out of some weird plastic thing and throwing the thing away and not understanding what's going in our mouth. And I don't like knowing that I'm being tricked by the chicken people. Like I don't want the chicken people to trick me. Fuck them.
Right.
And so that's I described that to this dude, Simon Roosevelt, who is I think the great grandson of Theodore Roosevelt. Just on a random phone call that he was on, and I said this kind of thing, and he's like, I wrote that down. I was like, oh shit. This means it's like, that's a smart guy. And so I've held on to that because of that affirmation that there is this idea that that's what we're doing.
Right.
And so that's why I respect the shit out of vegans, even if that vegan would be like, quit doing what you're doing. I'm like, yeah, I still respect the idea, and I won't remove, my respect for that idea won't be removed no matter what. If Pamela Anderson throws blood on me or not, I still think there's right in both of them, and you're just kind of doing different things.
Well, Ben, I do think that metaphor, I have to say, that's pretty brilliant. Like as you were describing starting together and then walking in these different directions, that really, I'm going to write that down too if I can. But yeah, I think, just a quick note, Pam Anderson, she just gets naked for animals.
Yeah, that's true. I kind of got to stop using her. That's a disingenuous.
She just takes her clothes off for animals. But let me just say something.
And if I would take my clothes off for animals, Robert, if I felt that it would help. I think it probably wouldn't help anybody.
Well, Ben, I know you can't see this. Ben's actually taking his clothes off.
Yeah,
right now
we're in a hotel room. It's for the animals, though. That's what I tell people when I'm walking around. Like, you see this?
It's for the animals.
I gotta help the animals out. But yeah, I mean, that's something that's been profound to me in the way of thinking about
that's
it.
Great. I want to touch on something you said about history being progressive, and I think if I can just expand on that or clarify it. So when you say, if I'm understanding you, when you say history is progressive, I think what you might mean, right, is that throughout history, the circle of those beings, those entities that we consider have moral value, who we value, that circle has been expanding. So at one time it might be like white people in Europe who are landowners or something, and then it's like, women or kids or people of color or of slave. Right. So that circle of what we call it in ethics, like of the circle of moral considerability, the things that that have to come on our radar. If you talk to a say a plantation owner in Virginia in 1820, and you say, do you think that those people working out in your field are just as morally important as you and your family? They go, no.
No,
right?
of course they're not. Yeah.
They're not in that circle, right? Of course, now we look back and we say, wow, that was just either they were in bad faith or they actually didn't think that those were human beings, right? But so what I want to say is with this metaphor you're talking about, and I think the animal rights movement in general is to say that circle, it needs to be expanded even more because, and this touches on something you and I talked about before the podcast, is the thing that gets you into the circle. It's not that you're a member of the species Homo sapien. It's that you're a thing that can suffer.
Yeah.
And once you open that door, once you go, the things that are in that circle are the things that can suffer. That now as you say, history is progressive. On this view, I've expanded the circle of moral consideration vastly. Now I have to go, does that bear suffer? Or does that elk suffer? Now it's in the club. Now, it's not to say that once you're in the club, everyone is equal. Because a lot of people will criticize, like PETA and Ingrid Newkirk, who's the president of PETA, will say, like, a boy is a pig, is a mouse. Oh, well, animal rights activists think that, a mouse is the same. But
but like if a mouse kills another mouse, we don't put it in jail.
Right.
Like,
that's not, I think the view is to say this is, and actually, I bet you, I think you're going to agree with this. And here's what I'm just guessing. So sentient beings like non-human animals, maybe you won't, but they're in the club of things that I have to consider. In other words, if I'm walking down the path and I kick a rock, you're not going to think anything of it. If I kick a little vole or like a little mouse, you might go, dude, what? And I can't just go, oh, it's just a mouse. You would go, if your son pulls the dog's tail, you're not going to go, that's okay. You're going to go, hey, don't hurt, right?
Yeah.
So we agree that that circle actually is pretty big. Now the question is this. Once we agree who's in the circle, then the question is, who's more important in the circle? Like, what's the hierarchy?
Dude, I totally, as I listened to you and I was, like I said, I was talking to the animal rights guy, Matt Johnson, yesterday, and I was confused by that point. Like, I just couldn't get it. I'm like, having the circle and accepting animals into where we are is confusing to me because I end up like, I'm killing animals. I'm not going to stop doing that. If they're in the same circle as me, what the fuck? And then there's all these issues of, if they're in the same circle as me, there's a lot we can get. I mean, I can go for days and days and poking holes in that idea, and we can get there if we need to. But what I would agree with in that idea is that, absolutely, any animal with suffering belongs, like, being in the circle. But hunting is to me a good way to kind of live in this circle because I'm taking one or taking few to help the many.
Right.
And I think if I could talk with the elk and be like, we're all in this circle, I'm going to kill something. Like, I might just tell myself I'm not if I do certain things, but there's no way. I can't see getting around me being a consumption engine. I can't see getting around me being understanding life eats life, and I can't see myself getting around that. So what am I going to do? All right. And I think we probably can agree to get to that point. Then what are we going to do? You have a different answer than I have. It's like, what are you going to do? Not eat animals. What I'm going to do, I'm going to kill wild animals and eat those to mitigate other animals that I have no vision over, no like vision of what they are. And I wrote this down to bring this up to you. So I was like, to me, it's this like vision issue. It's an issue of seeing. Within the circle, I can see my impact. I'm better at being in the damn circle. If I can't see my impact, if I'm choosing to take some walk away from my impact purposefully and then not look back at it, then I'm probably not as good in the circle as other people. So my vision, the vision of cutting the asshole out of an elk, the vision of pulling its guts out. And so maybe for animal rights folks, that helps them understand that I'm fighting for the same circle you're fighting for. It's just I'm not going to be so foolish as to think that I'm going to live ever in a world where there's no impact.
Right.
No human impact.
Yeah, that's it. You have to acknowledge that. Everyone has to acknowledge that. And I just want to go back to something you said about, it's true that life life needs life. Life kills life to survive. But most vegans, myself being in this area, is that it's not the issue of destroying life as much, because plants are alive. But see, plants aren't sentient. So let me Ben, let me ask you a question. Just sort of theoretical thought experiment. Is like you're in the circle, and all things being equal, you have to survive, and you could eat a plant or you can kill an elk. And just in my thought experiment, you have like full nutrition. It's not like you need a supplement. It's like you can survive. You can flourish. And so you're in the circle, and you're like, I can do this thing or I can do that thing. Separating out all the consequences we were talking about, factory farming. So I think that's a question I would have for you is, would you still choose, say, to kill the elk over eating the plant or killing the plant for sustenance? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think you never ask yourself that, because it's there's never going to be that time where I know that but
it's a thought experiment.
In a thought experiment, I would say, yeah, man, I'd probably eat the plants. Yeah.
So, and I think hopefully most people would think,
like I said, like the substitute chicken don't seem that bad to me.
Right.
In its principle, in the way that it's presented, it doesn't seem that bad to me. It's like, this tastes like something cool, and it could be plants instead of a thing that has babies. And great. Yeah, sure. But I think where people that disagree with vegans and people that are vegan get off the train is the thought experiment thing. Like in thought and theory, it's like, what I like about you is you're not so connected to the thoughts and theories. Like there's reality sitting right there alongside of them. It's important to have those thoughts and theories and then work through them, but it's also important to understand the reality of the world in which we live. If I could change the world in which we live, I'd do a lot of shit. I'd probably be able to fly. I would definitely have wings. Yeah. I would also, I don't know what else I would have, but would definitely have wings. But if I could change those things and have those, like, what would it be? I just can't, and so I have to just examine, what I can do.
Sure.
And if I don't feel like I have to kill the elk,
right?
I don't, and then that would be disingenuous for me to say. Like, if I don't kill the elk, then I can't be me.
Right.
Boy, that'd be a tough line to walk. But I do think I've come to this, and I feel comfortable in it because I've thought. And like I said, I challenged myself for a long time. Is this right? Am I just doing this thing because other people I know do it? And it's, that's probably not. I was going to bring up a comparison that would be confusing. But I think like at the moment where you decided to walk away from it, I decided to dive back into it pretty hard,
the other thing I want to do is just explain, or at least try to, talking about the thought experiment as being like theoretical, which it is, but I think the reason I brought the thought experiment up and why the thought experiment is important, because what it demonstrates, what I can infer from your answer to that thought experiment is that given the choice, you actually, given this like an ethical and moral choice, you think, and correct me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what you said in that thought experiment, it seems like you think if you had to choose, all things being equal, eating or killing the plant causes less suffering or is less harm, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And absolutely. And I think most hunters, I think that's something that most hunters struggle with and would probably cringe to hear me say. Like, what?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And also the thing about history being progressive, most hunters would think, what's he saying?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that kind of the argument this other guy's making? But I think it buttresses how I feel about this thing. Like if I felt killing elk was like somehow necessary or better than eating a plant, then I would have to admit to somehow like lusting for or holding up on a pedestal the killing of an elk. I don't do that. I don't want to do that. It's not, hunting it for me is many parts, but it's not all parts the killing.
Right.
And so I think it would be disingenuous for me to say I would rather take an arrow and jam it through the heart of an elk than walk over here and pick an ear of corn off a thing. Like the two acts aren't equal. You know?
Right. I think that's important, Ben. That's really important because you and I are. I mean, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And if someone said to me, you had to kill an elk, or you had to, there was like these children, like to me, it's a no-brainer. Like I have to kill the elk to see, right? So I think we agree that if I don't have to cause suffering, if it's merely because of my appetite or whatever, just because I like bacon or because I like to drive, diesel trucks just around, we both agree that if it's not necessary, like that, it seems like that choice, that wouldn't be the right choice. So what I think is really interesting here is that now you and I are looking at the world. We have similar, at least in this venue, we have kind of overlapping values. And now we're like, so what now I have to look at the real world and go like, so what is the way to decrease suffering? And as you said, my view is, I'm like, well, I just want to remove myself from like the killing of animals. And you think your view is, no, by actually adopting this, I'm actually decreasing suffering. And so I think that's where our disagreement is. And that seems like that's less of a philosophical, that's more of like an empirical, is it like the case that
it seems like more tactile than anything?
Yeah, it's like
what's your tactic here?
Yeah,
what are you going for?
Exactly.
And I think mine, like I said, if you were, I think that's important for me to realize, and for you and for folks listening, especially hunters, to realize, boy, it would be weird to say. And listen, I'm sure people will write in after this and tell me why maybe it's not weird to say, but to me, it's weird to say that you would pick killing the elk. If all things being equal, you're standing in a baseless environment, and there's an elk over there. You're super hungry. There's an elk over there, and there's a stalk of corn. It would be super disingenuous for any hunter to say they would go and take the life of that elk over picking the corn. I just think it would be disingenuous. But then we get to the point where now we leap back into the real world. We're like, okay, now we're here. We can't live in that world. We don't live in that world. And I think a lot of folks that look at vegans think that that's the world in which they live. They think they can live in a world, or some version of the vegan person thinks they can live in a world where there is that choice. I would say that there isn't.
Right.
I have not run into a time where I could make that choice. So now my choices are this complicated menu of have some of this, but over here, this is going to happen, right? Have some of this, and over here, this is going to happen. Have some corn, and over here, corn prices are going to go up, and wherever that corn came from, and some migrant worker is going to become poor because they can't afford corn now, and then they're going to deal drug, whatever. Or I'm never going to see that. And that's why I said to me, it's like this vision experiment. In embracing that experience, I've learned so much about myself, about what I can do as a person, about what an animal really can be and how it can really value your life, what it can give you that you may not know if you never went through that. It's a freaking hell of a hurdle to ask anyone just to like, you can find all these wonderful things, but you gotta kill that thing. You gotta walk over there, kill it. But here's what you're gonna get when you do that. Boy, I understand that's tough. Yeah. And I would never ask. I don't ask people to do it unless they want to. I wouldn't be like, son, you're 3 years old. You better really love to kill stuff, or your life won't be as enriched as mine is. No. Be like, but if you want to take that monumental step to go and pluck the life of an animal, something you didn't plant there, you're taking it out of the natural world, you didn't put it there. If you want to do that, I can show you how to do it in a way that will enrich your life and will be this version of consumption that helps you be a better part of the circle. And maybe there won't be a small tribe of us in the future that does it, but if it's a tribe of people that understand it, its impacts, and a way that it can function for good, I think it can stick around. But again, I don't know if veganism is growing. I don't know the numbers. I'm assuming it is on a worldwide scale.
Worldwide, it's about 2%. So,
but it's probably growing, right? I mean,
it's supposedly growing, but
you don't know. But we know that hunting is like not.
I think hunting is actually diminishing, the numbers of hunters.
Yeah. So we know by every measure there's not a standard of measure, which I wish there was, but there isn't. But we know by almost all of the measures that we can have here in our country, at least, that it's diminishing. And why? I mean, there's lots of reasons, but for me, if we could just hang on to that thing that is so enriching to my life, then we could make it work for the future.
Here's what I'm curious about too, because I mean, Ben, you're so thoughtful, and I'm just very impressed with the depth of your thought process about this. So, as a non-hunter, someone on the outside, I'm wondering about the issue of, and again, I'm sort of isolating. I know that, I mean, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Sure.
the way I think about hunting, the way that this is not original to me. Gary Varner, who's an animal rights philosopher.
Oh yeah, I
Right.
tried to get Gary on the podcast, and he said he's retired.
Oh, okay. He's a smart dude. I mean, not because he didn't want to do the podcast, because he's retiring. It's good to
Probably
retire.
both.
But he talks about what he calls therapeutic hunting, subsistence hunting, and sport hunting. So there's 3 categories, right? And they overlap. Therapeutic hunting is like we're thinning. We have to do this kind of conservation. We're hunting for that purpose. Subsistence hunting, of course, would be like Inuit are doing.
Yeah.
And then there's sport hunting. So and they of course overlap. But the way that I thinking about this in this kind of nice, neat categories is, it seems like the easiest target, no pun intended, for the vegan is the sport hunter, right? So, and I'm not saying that there are people who just go out, I'm just going to shoot and kill the animal for this pure pleasure. But I would say, right, in that case, because the way you're talking about hunting here, Ben, it's, I don't know if your view is the majority view among hunters.
Yeah.
It may or may not be. I mean, it seems to me from the outside like you're a particularly thoughtful hunter, but the fact that I live in a culture where it's perfectly legal, whether or not it's moral, that's a separate question, because legal and moral are 2 separate issues. But I live in a culture where it's perfectly legal for me, for no other reason than my own pleasure, to go get a 10-point buck, shoot it. I don't have to do anything. I can go bring it back to my place, chop its head off, throw it out, and put it on my wall. That just seems like, talk about where we've gone fucking sideways somewhere. Like the fact that is okay, as opposed to saying, the kind of fair chase rules and the hunter's ethics and stuff. That just seems like we've gone way off track here, if that's okay. So I wonder if you would agree with me in that that's a reflection, just like the thing in the plastic bag in your throat. The fact that we have somebody with a high-powered rifle killing, puts its head up, doesn't give a shit about it. Would you agree with me that that's something that we should advocate against? Or, I mean, am I putting you on the spot, on a hunter spot?
No. I put myself on the spot by having you on. But I do that, and so we can have this conversation. Yeah. So I think there's a lot, and we discussed this, and there's a guy who will just have been on the podcast prior to this, who is a hunter, and who is saying, like, my granddaddy's way of being a sport hunter's gotta go. Like, we gotta change this, and I see that, and I see it, and I look at it, and I'm like, I kind of agree with you, but there's something that pulls at me a little bit, that the culture and the idea of hunting is born in all types of motivations. So, like, I'll start by saying, like, at its core, I can't really disagree with that, because that's not what I do, right? So, like, your version of veganism that you have, if somebody's practicing, they're out there saying, like, if you don't eat vegans, you're going to hell, or if you don't eat vegetables, you're going to hell. Like, you don't agree with that, but you don't want to strike it from the ledger, because it probably it's doing some good. And then in hunting, I know for a fact that we've set up a system where that guy who just chops the head off, he has to pay money, and that money goes back to making sure there's more animals. He is doing good, whether he wants to or not. Like, he is killing an animal that wildlife biologists on a state level have said, there are this many animals, there's this much land, there's this many resources, we must balance them. Let's use this trophy hunter, as a tool to help us do that. That trophy hunter will pay us money. He assigns a different value to that animal. Maybe it's not the meat or the experience that I have. He assigns a different value to it. He'll pay for that. We'll put that money back into making sure that we have the things we need to make sure these animals, we perpetuate these populations in the future. And so I would just admit to being conflicted over that. It's not something that I do. I wouldn't, if I said this yesterday with Matt Johnson, if you took away the meat thing, I probably would quit doing it. I don't know. I've never been in that situation, but if you said, hey, you can only hunt things, you can't eat them, I'm like, well, what are we doing?
Right.
Why are we doing this? I better have to sit back down and reorganize my thoughts around why I'm doing it. So there's that point. So yeah, it's something I'm conflicted in. I see why it's good. I see the actual levers and buttons that the systems we've created to make that guy good. Let's call that guy an asshole. I've seen that. I've seen that it costs $50,000 to go on a sheep hunt, and I've watched sheep hunters shoot a sheep and just knowing they're not going to take the meat, but giving the meat to a local native tribe or something, or a local poor family, and lauding themselves for that. It's like, yeah, okay. At least we've built in the hunting community. We have built this thing where you better at the very least somehow make yourself seem good. It's like, 'cause we don't tolerate that shit if you're just whacking stuff and rolling around. We don't really tolerate that. You better give money to conservation. You better give the meat to someone who needs it. You better do something to stay in the club. I'm comfortable there, but philosophically, I don't agree with that person.
Right.
So, and I'm sure you could probably say the same with lots of
Sure.
lots of vegan folks. So it's definitely complicated.
Yeah.
In that way. And I mean, there's times where I've spoken out against certain groups and I've supported certain groups, and I'd love to see a time where we don't have to say the word trophy hunting, or we don't have to have that conversation, but we're here,
Right.
And I wish we could have the full conversation in the mainstream. I wish we could really just have the full conversation, not just pluck the thing that that is controversial and push it forward. Maybe if somebody can take that away from this conversation, it's like, boy, we're just not that far away. We never have been, I don't really think. We can pick reasons why we are. We can say trophy hunting, far away, crazy naked liberal lady, far away. But that's not really at the core of what we're trying to get to.
Right.
That's the fringe shit that we always point to as the people that aren't smart enough to come up with their own ideas just point to that stuff. But I think people that follow our company and listen to this have thought this through, and I've talked to a lot of them, and a lot of them are where I'm at. They're generationally moving away from what it used to be and trying to figure out what is ethics. I've given some talks on hunting ethics and sporting ethics, and a lot of people come and a lot of people have questions. And so I think there's a generation, not just our generation, but a movement within the hunting world to better understand this stuff and be able to better articulate it, where maybe before it would be there was a principle when I was coming up that was, I don't know if it was my dad's, but it was definitely his generation's, was don't talk about it. Because if you go hunting and you just keep it between us, nobody will come and attack it. If it's just us amongst us, we get what it is, know. And then social media came, and then here we are.
Yeah.
Vegan philosopher and a bearded hunting guy talking.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate it. I feel like we've covered all the ground. Is there anything left on the plate?
I mean, we could talk for hours.
I know.
No, I think for what we covered, yeah. I mean, if nothing else comes of this discussion, what I hope is that people who are listening who don't agree with animal rights or veganism or this kind of way that I look at the world, is that they at least think that there's a substantial body of thought. It's not simply animals are sacred and you're killing them and you're bad. It's if nothing else, they see that this is actually a nuanced view that is not merely like you said, throwing the blood on the. I mean,
it's not Looney Tunes. What you're saying, to me at least, maybe this will be the end of my podcast. All hunters will be like, this dude, what the fuck is he talking about? But he doesn't speak for us. But I only speak for myself. And when I'm in the room with you and we're talking, there's a lot of it that makes sense. And like I said, it wasn't. That didn't just happen to me. I've thought that for quite a while.
Yeah.
And so who knows how many people will listen to this and have those realizations, but I think a lot will, because I think we're just a lot closer than we thought.
Yeah.
Or most of us think.
Yeah.
And taking a little bit of time to walk through it, that's all you got to do. Take a little bit of time with a vegan. If you're out there listening to this and you got a vegan aunt that just always yells at you about your steak, your venison, sit down with her and have this kind of conversation. Be like, and if either of the two of you in the conversation hasn't thought out their ideologies enough, boy, you're going to be like, oh shit, I better go back. I better go back. Better go get back in the idea gym.
Hey,
start lifting.
Anyone who wants to contact me, tell them to go to my website.
Yeah, what's your website? Where can people find? I just Googled you and started watching videos and reading your papers. But I mean, is there a better?
rcjones.me.
rcjones.me.
Well, it's, I feel kind of embarrassed because rcjones.com. It's RC Jones is common. The only thing they had left was me, and I'm like, it sounds so like narcissistic. But anyway, with a name like RC Jones, all the other things were taken. So
no. If it was like rcjones.awesome.
Oh, okay.
That I'm awesome. Be like, all right, you're being a little presumptive.
Yeah,
you're pretty cool, but I don't know.
Anyway, rcjones.me. If you want to, and you can shoot me an email. I love to dialogue about this stuff because I think dialogue is, we talked about earlier about living a life. We're trying to, as I say in the paper, aspiring to live a life of nonviolence and less suffering. I think modeling dialogue is rather than vitriol and this polemic and yelling and I think part of that responsibility to nonviolence is to model to have a dialogue.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Yeah, and I remember early in my career, I mean, I look back at a lot of stuff I've written in my career. I worked for the NRA, like when I first came out of college, and it was a great place, nice people. They believe what they believe, and I believe very wholeheartedly in the Second Amendment and all those things. But there's just ways that I spoke and wrote at that time that I just don't know that I knew the gravity of what I was saying. Anti-hunters was a big thing, and this is like, yeah, okay, it's not. That might make me feel good. Like there's an enemy out there, but it ain't really going to get to the point of what I'm trying to do is make sure there isn't anti-hunters. If I want to make sure there isn't anti-hunters, I better not close the bridge off. If I want to make sure there's more hunters, I better not be so rigid in my ideologies that you have to think the way I think to get in the club.
Right.
If I do that, then less people are going to come into the old hunting club. So I think that's true for any, veganism or hunting or anything. If we can open the shades and be like, this is what's really going on in here. Some of it's really great. Some of it not so great. All of it is complicated.
Yeah.
And we embrace those things, and we can do something good. So, well, I appreciate you coming.
Thanks, Ben. It was really nice. I had a great discussion. It was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, we'll have to do more and see what we can.
I feel like I learned a lot.
Well, me too, and I think that, like you said, we can do a lot with this conversation. Take it further, or take this exact conversation and get more people involved. I think it's an important thing.
I like it.
All right, thanks, man.
Thanks, Ben.
I guess I grew up on an older road. A pedal to the metal, always did what I told.
That's it. That is all. Episode 71 in the books. Thank you to Phil. Thank you to Robert Jones. Thanks to all of you for listening. I will say that these last two episodes were something that I had thought about since the time that I thought about doing this podcast. For a bunch of reasons, but one, to challenge my own ideas about animal rights and about veganism, to challenge my ideas about Berkeley, California, and the people that live there, and to bring myself closer to the things I don't understand. So that's what I wanted to do. Hopefully, I definitely achieved that for myself. I think having both these conversations with Matt Johnson and Robert Jones back to back helped me have a deeper perspective and find real good meaning in the time I spent with both those gentlemen. and moreover, the time I spent in Berkeley, California, exploring these ideas. So hopefully there's value in it for you. There certainly was value in it for me. And I guess as an aside, one thing I was thinking is that I would love to go on the road with Robert C. Jones and take that conversation and let people sit in the audience and listen to us talk and ask questions, make assertions, and just open it up to a larger dialogue. Because I just felt, I'm sitting in a hotel room with the guy. I felt that it was so much value in that room that he brought and his perspective that it would be great for other folks to see that. So write in, tell Meat Eater to send us out and let us do it, because that would be cool. Also, I'd have to ask Robert, make sure he's got some time to go and do it. But that's neither here nor there. What else? Oh, themeateater.com. You got to go to themeateater.com. I don't talk enough on this show about some of the content on themeateater.com. I work on it every day. I got a great team of people here: Sam Lundgren, Spencer Neuarth, Morgan Mason, Joe Farinato. These guys are working on the website every day. We're posting a dozen or more articles a week there for you. That includes recipes. That includes a thing we launched called Fact Checker, where you write in and ask us to debunk a myth that's out there. We have Ask Wired to Hunt from Mark Kenyon. We have a Gear Dump series we just launched where guys like Ryan Callahan are dumping out his traditional archery traveling kit. And guys like Brody Henderson are showing you what he carries in his bucket when he goes fishing with his kids down by the lake. So all that stuff, it is too much content for you probably to take in on a daily, weekly basis. And we're going to keep pumping it out for you over there at themeateater.com. So head over there, and while you're there, go to the store and buy some THC swag. That would be great. And I'll end with, please, 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 write in THC at themeateater.com, THC at themeateater.com. Tell us what you thought of this show. Tell us whether we need to keep Phil or not. Tell us whether we need to talk about Game of Thrones. Tell us whether you like peas. Tell us whether you are enlightened by our conversation about veganism and animal rights. So next time, we're going to talk to a very enlightening gentleman. His name is, I fucking forgot his name. Fucking hell.
Robert C. Jones? Wait, who are you talking about?
William Von Hippel. Damn it. Bill. We'll just keep this all in, Phil. The whole thing. I forgot William Von Hippel. Sorry, Dr. Von Hippel. Your name is so, it rhymes with nipple. So why did I forget that? Anyway, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Jack Daniels. Oh, number 7. Tennessee whiskey got me drinking in heaven, and angels start to look good to me. They're gonna have to deport me to the fiery deeps. Oh, to the fiery deeps. Drinking in the fiery deeps. Oh, to the fiery deeps. Drinking in heaven.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins. Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls. I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies. He loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.